Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to the Preservation Board. I am going to call a roll and determine who's here. Commissioner Fathman, are you here?
I'm here.
Commissioner Richardson, are you here?
Here.
Commissioner Colleen, are you here?
Present.
Commissioner Hamilton, are you here?
Here.
Commissioner Vines, are you here?
Here.
Alderman, Commissioner Vacara, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
I am present. Have I overlooked anyone? Okay. Has everyone looked over the agenda for today? Does anyone need to recuse themselves from consideration of any of these items?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm going to recuse myself on item E.
Okay. Commissioner Richardson recuses himself, agenda item E. Anybody else? Okay. We have no minutes to approve, so we will approve no minutes.
Yes, we do.
It's not on the agenda.
Okay. I didn't approve the minutes on the agenda.
Can we amend the agenda to have the minutes on?
Okay, which minutes would you like us to approve?
April, May, and June.
April, May, and June. Commissioners, has anyone read the minutes for April, May, and June? And if so, have you got a motion?
Make a motion, we approve them.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion or changes?
Nope.
Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The minutes for April, May, and June are approved. Okay, Commissioners, let's get started. It seems like a moderate meeting tonight, not a short one, not a long one. Is agenda item B still on the agenda, Mr. Director?
It is not. Westmoreland is off the agenda.
Okay, Commissioners, note a change to the agenda, unnoticed until now, that agenda item B will not be considered tonight. Calling first agenda item A, 4710 Westminster Place.
All right, this is 4710 Westminster Place. Yeah. This is an application for a preliminary review.
You very well.
You can't?
Very well. Turn it up some
You
more.
want to turn it up? This is 4710 Westminster Place. It's an application for a preliminary review. It is located in the Central West End Local Historic District. The applicant proposes to paint the exterior a white color. It is currently painted an orange brick color. And they are doing a total rehab to the interior and the exterior. And in order to bring this before the board, those were split up as the other changes to the exterior mostly met the standards. So here's an example. Here, it's 4710 Westminster Place. Here's a house next to it that is unpainted. And here are houses across the street on Westminster Place. And again, more pictures for context on their street as well. And then this is the only building on their block that is painted a cream color. And it's on the same side of the street as theirs, as 4710 Westminster Place. On the left is the current facade that is, only the front is painted, and it is painted a color that matches the underlying brick. And this is the proposed facade. It would be a white color on only the front facade. And here's their color palette. And according to the standards, unpainted masonry should not be painted, and if it has been painted, either prior to the standards or against the standards, it should be removed if at all possible. And then, although there is no specified palette of approved colors, the colors that are appropriate to the style of architecture, the character of the adjacent buildings, and the neighborhood should be used when buildings are painted. And it does not comply with number one, because the masonry has already been painted, but they are not removing it. Oops, sorry. And then it does also not comply with number 4 because white is not a appropriate color for the architecture. And I have here a letter in opposition to the project from the Central West End Planning and Development Committee.
Thank you.
And the Cultural Resources Office recommends that the Preservation Board withhold preliminary approval to repaint the front facade as it does not comply with the Central West End Historic District standards.
Questions on the right side? Questions on the left side? Thank you very much. Okay, we have the owners present. Come forward.
Hi.
Good
Sarah
afternoon.
Riley.
Tell us who you are
Sarah Riley,
And I'm Rob Munsick.
and what is your address?
4710 Westminster.
Same?
Yeah,
Yes.
Same.
although not living there
Not
currently.
living there currently.
No
Proceed.
running water.
I think we have a,
Yeah, so we have a little additional PowerPoint here for you. So we wanted to provide some additional photos of our brick up close. One of the arguments was that the brick color, the color painted was an accurate representation of the true brick. And with those pictures, go ahead.
next slide, please.
You can see that the color is actually quite orange.
Next slide, please. So there at the bottom, you can see that there's a very darker element of brick,
Thank you.
rust, and then there's the orangey
Paint color.
red paint color on top of it.
So about 98% of the house is still painted. There's a small portion under the windows and on the sides of the porch that has dissolved over time. There was a overgrown planting bed there that kind of, I think,
Probably
attributed to that.
Probably ate away at the,
But overall, the paint is very well intact on the house. So we did look into options of removing the paint. This is a 113-year-old brick. We consulted a mason. We did a lot of online research to try to understand these processes, and everything pointed in the direction that this was not a good idea, that there would be a lot of damage potentially to the brick, and could cause future damage with leaking inside and outside. You can see in the last photo where the brick, what the detail of the brick is that we would be working with after removing the paint. So it's not in the best shape. I have a quote from the National Park Service, U.S. Department of Interior's Preservation Brief Number 6, that says there's no one formula that will be suitable for cleaning all historic building surfaces. Although there are many commercial cleaning products and methods available, it is impossible to state definitively which of these would be the most effective without causing harm to the building fabric. It is almost impossible to remove paint from masonry surfaces without causing some damage to the masonry, and it is best to leave the surfaces as they are or repaint them if necessary. So to move on, in general, the CRO had recommended not painting the house white because it does not belong within this characteristic of the home. They were calling it a craftsman-style home. And respectfully, we disagree with that assessment. Our house is really a hybrid that features a lot of different elements, mostly American Foursquare, with the 3 stories, top story with a monitor dormer, a covered front porch, traditional Foursquare floor plan. And there are also touches of colonial revival present, as we have rounded columns on that dormer. This also has elements of a Tudor style because we have the decorative half timbering on the sides of the porch as well as stucco. So it really is truly a hybrid. It's not what we would consider what most dictionary definitions of a craftsman are, with low pitched roof lines, gabled hip roof,
Prairie style.
deeply overhanging eaves, exposed rafters, the tapered pillars, 4/1 or 6/1 windows, shingles. Really none of those things are present in our home. Our architect actually advised that she felt it was actually more of a Georgian style with the roof line, flat windows, flat window headers, dormers, chimney, and brick. So it really is truly a hybrid like many of the homes on our street.
Next slide, please.
So
Yep.
Next.
go ahead. Sorry, the next one. So this is our suggested color palette, and I do have swatches that I can hand out to you because those colors, if you want to go ahead, the white dove, those colors are quite washed out. We took careful consideration when selecting this color palette, and we scoured the neighborhood. There are many examples. There were 55 examples of painted brick homes within the several blocks in which we live. There are 19, so over a third of those are painted in some palette of white, so whether it be off-white to true white. We selected a color that we felt was more of a warm white. It's the white dove would be the main brick color at the very end of the swatch. It's a warmer white, it's not a stark white. We also have 3 examples of painted brick homes on our block. There was one that was missed in this presentation, and there are 5 additional on the block of 4500 Westminster. There are 17 on the block behind us, McPherson. So if you go to the next slide, there are 6 that nearly have identical color palettes with which we are proposing, and you can go to the next slide as well. I think those actually might be in your printout as well. So for us, we were trying to pick something that was classic and also indicative of the neighborhood as well. So that was why our choice of white and black. And there are additional examples, 55 pictures of painted brick homes within the West End. So I don't know if you really feel the need to. Okay, you have the printout, sure.
The printout doesn't have all 55
Well,
for
our
due to
printout is, but
brevity
hers
purposes, but
Hers does.
but
Hers does.
the
She printed them.
CRO has it.
Yeah, she printed them.
Did it? Questions on the left side?
Did you say someone went to your house and evaluated you can take that paint off, or are you just referring to the website?
No. We've had a mason, yeah, we
We've had a
consulted
mason.
with a
Okay.
mason, yeah,
Okay.
yes. And to try to better understand the process, because there are so many different types of removal for brick or paint. We did a lot of online research as well.
Okay.
Any more questions on the left side? Questions on the right side?
Do you happen to know when the current paint was applied?
We don't actually, so we think perhaps that maybe the last owner, the previous owner to us, who had been in the house for quite a long time, we think that he may have painted it, but we really can't pinpoint specifically.
I had just a question about your rendering. It looked like you might be contemplating replacing windows too, because you had some.
We're replacing all
we
the
are.
windows.
So is that coming back to us later?
I think they approved it.
No, those met the standards.
Oh, those did?
Yes. They separated it out into 2 permits.
Okay, cool.
The questions on the right?
You do know that a lot of these houses were painted before the ordinances were written, so they're like grandfathered in.
Sure.
And so just because there are a lot of houses, that doesn't mean that they're right, or they're good
Sure.
for the brick.
And we're here to try to do the right thing.
Yeah, that's why we're here in the first
So-
place.
Glad
Yeah,
you're
we,
here before it got done, thank you.
yeah.
Thank you very much. Neighborhood Association is present.
Mr. Gallo,
Yes.
I got a question for the,
Hold on one second, a delayed question from my left-hand side. This is not unusual. This happens almost every month.
Okay.
like Columbo.
Exactly.
So you showed photos of your house. At any point, you take a sample swatch and try and remove the paint so that we could see.
We just acquired our permits last week
Week.
Friday, I think, or
So we have not tried
we
to
have not
remove the
had the
paint.
opportunity to physically touch the
Correct.
exterior.
Given the research that we did and the condition of the brick that is there, we felt it would be more harm than.
Well, small sample.
Well, we don't want to touch it if it's,
Well, honestly, we were waiting for a permit, so
we're trying to,
yeah.
not
Yeah.
touch it until
Yeah.
we come in front of you all, so that's our.
Okay.
Actually, I'm gonna have a delayed question.
Oh my God.
From the talky left-hand side.
Yeah, just, have you spoken with the alderman from the area?
We have not.
We have not.
Okay, thank you. That's usually a good idea, but okay.
This is an alderman.
Okay.
But don't speak to him.
No, the alderman for the area. Do you know who your alderman is?
Heather
Heather
Navarro.
Navarro?
Yeah.
I would talk.
You never talked to her.
No, I said, if I were them, I would talk.
Oh, okay. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, my name is William Seibert. I live at 54 Waterman Place, and I'm a member of the Neighborhood Planning and Development Committee. And I plan to tell you what we think. We feel the best approach would be safely to remove the paint, if that is possible, and I think it's something, as Commissioner Robinson indicated, is something that ought to be investigated. But I would respectfully disagree that this is not a craftsman-style house, especially in view of the windows they're proposing to put back in, which are multi-lighted windows, which are very typical of craftsman houses. White paint is not appropriate. In fact, it is, I think, at war with this style of building. Craftsman houses are characterized by the use of dark brick. The board recognized this several months ago when they required removal of a white paint wash on a craftsman house at 29 Kingsbury Place, where the owner had inappropriately sought to lighten things up. And the dark brick and tile was obscured with the white paint. I do know that they are removing that now. They found a safe way to do it, and it is being removed. Again, I was just in the 4700 block of Westminster, and I could only find one house, the one that was shown by Bethany, that is painted discernibly light color. In fact, to me, it looked as if all the rest of the houses retained their unpainted brick facades. And this house, of course, is painted a color that is perhaps not the exact color of the brick underneath. It is a brick color and is dark. If the existing paint is not removed and repainting is allowed, we strongly feel that it needs to be of a dark brick color, or a dark color at least, that is compatible with this type of a house. And I would also, I was going to point out, but Commissioner Fathman did for me, that vast majority of the painted brick houses in the neighborhood were painted long before the standards of the historic district were in force. And in general, it is our desire not to have one more brick house painted. Since this one is already, again, we feel, as the staff has pointed out, that white would be definitely inappropriate for this house. Thank you.
Hold on one second, please. Commissioner Fathman, you've got a question?
Well, I was going to ask if you could explain to the audience,
To us.
to us,
To all present.
no, about the objection to painting brick houses. and
Well,
how that got started.
I think because the brick is a material that needs to breathe, and covering it with paint causes dampness behind it and can be damaging to the brick and to the pointing. I would suspect that the house was painted to avoid needed tuck pointing, frankly. That happened an awful lot.
Commissioner Hamilton, you got a question?
No, I have a motion.
We'll come to it, and you'll make the motion. Commissioner Robinson, a question now, or do you want to wait just a minute?
You know, I'm gonna wait a minute.
Commissioners on this side, Commissioner Vines.
Nope.
Commissioner Killeen?
No, sir.
Commissioner Richardson?
No.
Commissioner Robinson?
No, I had a comment versus a question, so I'll wait.
Okay. Commissioner Hamilton, have you got a motion?
My motion is the preservation board grant preliminary approval to repaint the front facade of the house.
Is there a second? Motion made and seconded. Discussion.
I feel they said the owners brought a masonry out, and his opinion or her opinion was it would damage the brick. And so if it was already painted per this ordinance, it was already painted, they had someone come out, they said it will damage the brick if they were to try to remove it. So I'm going with the masonry's opinion.
What about the color?
Alderman?
No,
I like the color, but, you know, it's a.
The new
I'm
color or the
flexi-
old color?
I like the white, but.
That swatch back. Who's got the swatch?
I give it to Don. No, I agree with that, and I think since it's already been painted,
Yeah.
and I went through that last time about the sign, I think anytime you start trying to remove stuff, you're gonna end up with more damage. I think it's already painted, there might be color choices, but I'm fine with white, I think it looks kinda nice.
To me, it matches up with the ordinance. It says if it was unpainted, you can't paint it, but this is clearly painted and painted in a weird, ugly color, in my opinion. So.
I agree.
And if they already did the due diligence to bring someone out to actually look at the brick, and this is their main job in life, why don't we go with the expert?
I brought them back because you seemed entranced by the
No,
Dove white.
No, it's just, it's not a hard white, and I think it looks nice.
I like it,
Yeah.
but, I mean, I'm in real estate itself, so. And there's other houses in that area that are white, so.
Commissioner Robinson?
Okay, so let's start with, this is an American Foursquare with I believe accents of Georgian and Craftsman. And as such, you would not find a white painted historic American Foursquare. So that's first. Second, I have restored a house in the 4100 block of Laclede, and we did in fact remove the paint. So the paint is removable, and without having a sample of such, I've actually done this.
But the masonry said, it's not the same.
Exactly, and so
And he came out and looked at it.
without a sample of it being done, I am completely against painting this and painting it white. I mean, other than the fact that given that I live in the area, I know the houses that are painted white and that they happened some time ago, but as Commissioner Fathman said, what was done before the historic district doesn't mean that we can do that again. There are a number of reasons why this should not be repainted.
I guess it's my understanding from the Mason, I'm going based off of their testimony.
And I'm going based
That-
off of having done it.
Right, but I'm saying if you have a professional masonry that says all bricks are different, and he or she specifically came out to look at
I
it,
don't,
and they did their due diligence.
I don't consider that to be due diligence without attempting to remove the paint in some section.
To be fair, it is the testimony that we heard. Commissioner Fathman, would you like to add a remark?
No, thank you.
Commissioners on this side.
Well, I guess one thing I'd say is that if it can be removed safely, then I I don't think we can approve this if it can't be. The paint color, I think, is irrelevant based on the standards. The standards say that there's no specific palette of approved colors, and it's just a recommendation that the color be appropriate to the style of architecture, not a requirement. So it really comes down to, can it be safely removed? Because the standard says if it can, it should be or shall be. So I guess I got a question for staff. Do you guys have any thoughts on that one? Can it be safely removed?
We have taken paint off hundreds of buildings. Very rarely do we have a problem with it, depending, of course, on the kind of paint that was used in the first place. Test patches are done all the time on all historic buildings.
All the time. Is
That's
why
what
you
we
don't do
test.
this.
Thank you.
Anybody else on this side?
I would echo that, and just out of respect for the neighborhood, this is, I think, the second oldest neighborhood association. They've done their homework. Mr. Seibert came up here and testified that he knows that paint can be removed from these buildings in this area. So I think we got to follow the standards on this one.
Commissioner Richardson, just for clarification, is your thought that they should do a test swatch, see if they can get it off, and if they can, get it off? And leave
Yes.
it- And then not repaint it, or?
And not repaint
Yeah,
it.
that's
Correct.
fair.
Okay.
Top point.
Let's get the applicant back up and see if they'll do that. Will you do a test swatch?
Doubting their evidence.
Will you try to take it off?
We can, sure.
It is a full front facade, though. So, you know,
It-
just because we do a test swatch in one area doesn't mean that it won't damage test swatches in other areas on the building.
Okay, thanks. There's a motion on the floor, Commissioners, it's been made and seconded. I'm going to call a roll. On the motion before us, which is to grant preliminary approval, Commissioner Fathman, do you vote yes or no? No. Commissioner Robinson, do you vote yes or no?
No.
Commissioner Richardson, do you vote yes or no?
No.
Colleen, do you vote yes or no? No. Commissioner Hamilton, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Vines, do you vote yes or no?
No.
Alderman Vaccaro, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
That is 2 yeses, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 noes. The motion fails. Commissioner Richardson, have you got a motion?
I would move that the Preservation Board grant preliminary approval to repaint the front of the facade in the event they establish, to the satisfaction of the staff in consultation with the neighborhood development group, that the paint cannot be safely removed from the front facade.
Second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
You help me.
Okay, Commissioners, let's take up 1919 Sydney.
You.
Where's that at?
Sydney?
C.
Oh, I think it's
Your
on
street's
the,
probably your neighbor's.
page 10. Yeah, page 10.
Yeah, page, yeah. I had it in front of me, I don't know what I was dreaming about.
Sorry, I was trapped back there. I'm Jan Cameron from the Cultural Resources Office. And this, while it's under an address of 1919 Sydney, is in fact 24 buildings. Excuse me just a second. Where's my audiovisual person? Okay, well, while we're doing this,
Oh, there you go.
No.
this is a proposal to replace windows in 24 buildings owned by the Senate Square Development in the Benton Park Historic District. We don't have it up here. Many of the buildings, but not all of them, have already had their windows replaced without a permit. We went out and issued a stop work order upon several complaints from the neighborhood. What has been installed are vinyl windows, many of them multi-light, in inappropriate configurations. The standards require historic replacement windows, which can be aluminum or composite or wood on primary and visible elevations. What's that?
It's something that
Okay.
People take it.
Where'd you get that?
I just had to start it over and start slideshow.
Isn't it great we have a millennial here to do this for us?
Okay, I don't know where you were on here.
I was past there. Okay. Thank you.
yes, it is.
All right. I apologize for that. We thought we had everything nailed down. Okay. These are the 24 buildings, and you can see they do make up a substantial impact upon the Benton Park Historic District. They are along Sydney, Congress, Senate, and there are 3 along I went back and I looked at previous shots from Google. The windows that were taken out were not appropriate historic replacement windows. And I hope you can see these better, because what's actually occurred is in the arched window, what was originally a fully arched window, double hung, has had a fixed semicircular transom inserted with a sunburst kind of mutton configuration. And then the muttons, all the windows are multi-light. They're 6/6 for the most part. So what was before is on the right, and what is now is on the left. Here's a close-up of the replacement window. And that is a 6/6 light with the sunburst transom. Okay. 1923, 21 to 23 Congress, similar installation. And again. These 3 have not been done yet, but they are proposed to have the similar replacement windows installed. Again, we have 6/6. And the Google 2017 image on the right. It's very similar. These have not been replaced yet. So the windows do not comply really in any way. Many of the windows are arched or were originally arched. Brick mold has been covered. Another example of the changes. Here's a close-up so that you can see that these windows originally had segmental arches on them. You can just see that on the right, even though those windows were replaced inappropriately also. But now we've got new vinyl 6/6 windows with a very heavy wrapping on the exterior. Another example, these are very tall, narrow windows, so it was probably difficult to get a vinyl window to work, so the solution was to install a single hung window with the meeting rail not in the center of the opening as it should be, but as you see it here. Okay. And this is a good comparison because this house is one unit of this 4-family has been done in the lower right. And this is a mystery to me because this is the main office for Senate Square. And I don't know whether windows have been replaced or not, but they are proposed to be replaced. The Google shot from 2007 shows pretty much what's there now, so I don't know exactly what's happening there. And again, more inappropriate conditions. And okay, so the staff is recommending that the preliminary review be denied, and that the owner be instructed to install appropriate windows that comply with the historic district standards, including restoration of the appropriate configurations and brick molds.
On my right?
I guess my question is, there are 24 buildings, you said. Is it a relatively change in ownership or something? I'm just wondering how they would not be aware.
I don't know. Hopefully the property owner is here tonight.
Okay, thanks.
On my left? Thank you, Jan.
Oh, I'm sorry, I need to submit into the record a letter in support of the staff's recommendation from the Benton Park Neighborhood Association.
Noted. Signed up to speak, Tim Mulligan.
What's the next thing?
He would know the pool, he should have known not to do that.
Good afternoon. I'm Tim Mulligan, a longtime resident of Benton Park and chair of the Benton Park Building Review Committee for about 20 years. We had received word from...
Let me stop you for 1 second. Is an applicant present? I thought you were here as an applicant. Hold on 1
No.
second while we determine. Is there anybody here to speak for this project? Proceed.
Here.
Good guys.
We had received word that windows were being replaced, and immediately, calls were made and to the Cultural Resources Office, to the Building Division, just to request that a stop work order be issued until this could be sorted out. So this, I guess, systematically, comes up and is a point of opposition as it does not comply with the Benton Park Historic District, guidelines in any way. More specifically, as Ms. Cameron was pointing out, the false, divided lights, the little tape inserts within the window, just totally cheapen the quality of the windows in this neighborhood. The letter that I submitted, I guess, want to acknowledge, I guess, the significance of this development. This originally was developed in the late 70s to early 1980s. There's a collection of 24 properties that we were made aware of with this window change. Quick online research indicates that they have 99 rental units available. So my point is to acknowledge and appreciate the impact that this development has had in the neighborhood. There's been considerable development that was, I guess, legitimized, as they weren't the first person to renovate in the property in the neighborhood. The takeaway from this, though, would be that this is a significant organization, and I'm not sure at what point, if it's 10 units, 20 units, 50 units, that a company is considered a professional property management company. In my mind, this is a company that's large enough, to know how to play the rules. In researching through my files, I just wasn't looking for it, but dumbly, stumbled across a note that was sent to the Citizens Service Bureau in April of 2009, citing, that the work was going on at the office property at 1921 Sydney, that at that time they were covering, the brick mold, and we requested a stop work order, be issued. So to my knowledge, the ownership and, quickly checking, the ownership log, with the Geo St. Louis, is that the ownership is LLC, I think, from 2004. So this work, this illegal work in 2009, and then this illegal work in 2019, they know better. So that would be the extent of my testimony.
Thank you very much. Questions on the right? Questions on the left? Alderman?
Let me have a question. I assume,
I'll call the Alderman.
okay, that's fine then.
Alderman Gunther?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Just Dan Gunther, 9th Ward Alderman, but prior to that, I've been also a member of the Building Review Committee through the Benton Park Neighborhood Association for about 17 years, just acting as alderman over the last 2 years. But we took a lot of work to put together local codes to try to get a standard for redevelopment in the Benton Park neighborhood. And as Tim mentioned, this is not the first time that there have been alterations on the Senate Square buildings without, not only without a building permit, but also alterations that have not complied with some of our standards. So I'm here just solely to echo what Mr. Mulligan said, in that we would like for the windows, to be the same standard that we put everyone else through, whether they're putting new construction in the neighborhood or rehabbing. Everyone follows the rule that the front facade windows either have to be the wood or a metal, but retaining the brick mold and retaining the character of the historic neighborhood. So when I was first made aware of the construction going on, we had the building inspector go out. The installation crew was a little bit combative with him. It took a little bit of work to get them to actually stop with the installations, all the way to putting the stop work order on them. So we would like that to ask the board to hold them to the same standards that we hold everyone else that builds in Benton Park neighborhood. And with so many buildings, 24 buildings, it is a huge impact in an area that we would like to have the same historic windows as the replacements. So I guess I will answer any questions that there may be.
Alderman?
I do.
Hi, Alderman.
How many of the buildings are, so there's 24 buildings, how many of the buildings already have these new unpermitted windows in them already?
I am not exactly sure, but I believe there were 4 that I have made 4 buildings that I've been made aware of that have either full replacements or they got halfway through them and then stopped. But we may have a.
I would say about half of them have been done.
Okay.
Half of the 24?
Half the 20, so about 12 of them.
All of the windows have been purchased through the other buildings.
Mm-hmm.
So Dan, are you recommending we tell them take the windows out? Or are you recommending we don't let them go farther? Because I'll go with, but I'm just.
I am recommending that we follow what cultural resources would be to take the windows out and replace them with a window that is approved through cultural resources and retaining the historic brick mold and the details that all the other residents in the neighborhood have to do.
I always support the alderman. I might have a question of somebody here. What happens? I guess they don't get the occupancy, so they can't use the buildings. What happens if they say, we're going to go take this to the 22nd Judicial, or we're not going to honor what you guys are saying? I'm new to this, but what happens?
Well, they can, of course, appeal a denial of an application to
Right.
circuit court.
Right.
That's their right. What the city would likely do is refer this to housing court and begin the court process that way. That's our main method of trying to gain compliance.
Yeah, I was just curious what happens. I always support what the alderman says. It's his neighborhood. Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Killeen, have you got a motion?
But we don't always.
Yeah, I move Preservation Board withhold preliminary approval for the window replacements as the windows do not comply with the Benton Park Historic District standards.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Commissioners, I'm sorry, did somebody speak?
I'll second it.
I think Randy.
It was seconded.
Yeah. Randy.
Randy.
I do want to mention something on this. I went into this office to confront these people on this issue. This is on my street. And the young man who was working at the office implied that this organization was aware of the rules, but did not want to comply with them. And they are not here tonight, which is further evidence to that effect. I think that they're just looking to ride through this process and get into the appeals process, and they had no intentions of following our rules and the Benton Park District, and I think they need to be held to them straight away.
Thank you. Anybody else? A motion on the floor that's been made and seconded. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break. D is a new application that we began to consider last month and deferred to complete our consideration until this month. Thank everybody for their patience.
No, it's not for Tower Grove, it's for the one on Indiana. All right, sorry about that. We have chit chat over here. So I'm Dan Krasnoff, Cultural Resources Director, and this is a new application for a demolition at 1400 Tower Grove Avenue in the Forest Park Southeast National Register Historic District and in a Preservation Review District. Last month, we reviewed this project, so I'm going to very mostly, keep my remarks to the what's new this month that wasn't in the body of information last month. So in order to get us there, I'll just quickly go through some slides. This is the building. One thing that's different from last month is you'll now see that the building commissioner has ordered that the fence around the building be moved out 1 lane into traffic. And so there's 1 less lane of traffic in front of this building due to concerns about its structural soundness. This is a map showing the building. So the dark blue area is the National Register District. The building that's in black is the building proposed for demolition. And the red rectangle represents the boundaries, roughly the boundaries of the Missouri Foundation for Health campus. This is another site plan that kind of just shows the relationship of the 3 buildings that are extant on the site. 1400 Tower Grove, which is the building we're talking about tonight, 1408 Tower Grove, which is being rehabbed by the applicant, and 4240 to 54 Tower Grove, which is the main building that the Missouri Foundation for Health has rehabilitated, which was the Columbia Ironworks building, which was in horrible condition with terrible environmental problems, and that got cleaned up by the foundation in their efforts to move into the neighborhood in Forest Park Southeast and claim this site as their own. This is a view of the south facade. This is a view of the north facade. This is a view of the east facade, which had the collapse around the corner there. And there's a picture where the collapse took place. So what's new in this application tonight? In the slides, they have amended their proposal. If you look at the rendering of the building at the corner there, it has been amended to much more closely mirror the proportions of the third-story roof. The third-story roof, you will see there's some coupled windows on flanking that center section that's raised slightly. They have increased the height of the mansard roof to match the height of the existing mansard. They have also I think slightly change the angle on that to match what's there now in the current building. After the meeting, I had some conversations with the applicant about what we could do here to further enhance the design. And really there were two aspects that were brought to the fore. One aspect was the mansard roof change, which you see here. The other was a discussion about some of the details on the building. And that led to changing the motion that is proposed for the board tonight to include not just the demolition of the building and the requirement that a building permit be obtained before demolition is approved, but also a requirement that they consult staff on design details on the building. I think that'll give us the opportunity to work and try to get some of the finer brickwork on the building that you see in the current structure based on what is feasible and what is not. There's a site plan, and then we just have context photos around the building. So what you heard last time or what you were given last time was a support letter for this demolition and a redevelopment proposal from Alderman Joe Rohde, a letter of opposition from a gentleman named Ryan Day, a structural analysis from HOK, and a letter from HBD contractors stating that they did not feel it was safe for their construction crews to be in the building. My sense of the board last time was that there was there was a comfort level with the condition of the building being very deteriorated, and that most of the questions were about the design of the building, and most of the specific remarks about the design of the building were based on the mansard roof and the fact that it didn't quite match up with what's on the building now. And so that part has been rectified. So with that, let's see if I can get back to the rendering there, because I think that'll be the main point of discussion. There is one other aspect of this project that really didn't get a lot of discussion, and I have a handout for that, and that is that the applicant had actually gone to the due diligence of doing full rehab construction drawings and getting a building permit for this building, for the rehab. And only when they found the structural conditions were as bad as they were, did they abandon that effort for the effort to do a new building, which they consulted the neighborhood on extensively, the Neighborhood Committee for Forest Park Southeast that works in development. And I know we have at least one member of that committee here tonight, and we have community representative as well in the director of Park Central who can speak to that as well. And with that, I will conclude my remarks.
Questions for the director on this side? No. Questions for the director on this side? Thank you. Missouri Foundation is present. Please arrange your presentation the way you want.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Jill Nowak. I'm the CFO and the Vice President of Administration for Missouri Foundation for Health. I wanted to thank you for seeing us again, and also thank Dan and his staff for their work with us over the past month as they've helped us understand what we can bring forward to help you understand our objective in the project. I did want to take a few minutes up top just to talk a little bit about the foundation and about our motivation and our goals for this property as a whole. Missouri Foundation for Health is about 20 years old. We've never owned property until 2017 when we purchased the property that we're currently trying to renovate. We have taken occupancy in the Columbia Iron Works in January and have our headquarters functions there, all our staff and public functions there. And this building on Tower Grove Avenue would be a further extension of functions that we take on behalf of the community. The foundation is basically an endowment, so we have no source of revenue other than the earnings on our portfolio, and we are meant to exist in perpetuity, and we have every plan to exist in perpetuity, and we have every plan to exist in these buildings in perpetuity. So our goal with these are to make them as solid and sound as possible for not only our use currently, but well into the future, hopefully for hundreds of years. When this project was envisioned by our board and staff in 2015, it was very important to them to be in the city of St. Louis. It was very important to them to be in buildings that needed some tender loving care to get back into use. And it was particularly important to look for buildings that might not otherwise be renovated, particularly those that had been long vacant. And I think you understand we hit all those goals. So with the Tower Grove Avenue building, as Dan shared, we were ready to go on the renovation. We had the drawings and we're ready to go, and we're disappointed. Certainly, in terms of our timeline, we were very disappointed to know we couldn't move forward with those. But our primary goals for this building at this time for the foundation are that it's safe and sound for people to work in and be around, and that we're building on a very solid foundation that for years to come, the foundation can, inevitably in 20 years, the staffing will change, something will change, somebody will want to change something. So we want to make sure we're building on a sound foundation. We feel we have a really strong team around us, and this evening several of our team members are here. Mike Gartenberg is our construction consultant and our owner's rep, and he's been involved in the project since the beginning. We have Barb Anderson-Curlin and Stephen Crane from HOK. Stephen is a structural engineer, and Barb is an architect, and Barb has been involved in the buildings before we even had these buildings. She was part of the team that went out to help us find property that would fit our needs. We also have Mike Perry from HBG, our general contractor, with us this evening, and we're here to answer any questions that you have and help you understand where we're at with the project. I am obviously not the person who can answer most of the questions you have. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background, and I'm going to ask several of the team members to give you a little more depth in that. And the first one I'm going to ask to talk with you is Mike Gartenberg.
Good afternoon.
So you have, I saw it get passed out just a couple of minutes ago, a brief outline of the history of this building. And in my conversations with Dan a few weeks or so ago and subsequent to our meeting, it became, grossly apparent to me that the history of where we have been with this structure was kind of not being brought to the surface. There were comments made at that meeting which caused me to believe that maybe others felt we should go take a closer look at this building. And so what I want to do is kind of very briefly walk you through the process to let you know what has been done with this. And to not really repeat what's in this memo, I do want to point out that we have been working on this campus for 5 years with our design and our evaluation and so forth of these buildings going back to 2015. The properties were purchased and assembled in 2017 or so, and HOK did perform the due diligence on each of these structures and performed or prepared design documents for us. And our initial plan was to pursue the Columbia Iron Works building and this Tower Grove building. The Tower Grove building represents about 20% of the square footage of those two buildings combined. Due diligence was performed, but nonetheless, there will always be surprises, and there were many surprises. But these buildings were scoured. So HOK prepared a set of specifications for the two buildings. Those are the specifications. Approximately 20% of that represents the Tower Grove building. The remaining 80% represents the Columbia Iron Works building that we prepared. This set of 153 sheets represents that same scope of work. Approximately 20% of those are design of the Tower Grove building. The remaining 80% of the Columbia Iron Works building. In 2000, and I have to look and cheat here a little bit, in early 2018, the contract was signed with HBD, between Missouri Foundation for Health and HBD, to construct all of the above, to do the work on both buildings. We went to the city of St. Louis, who asked that we split this out for their purposes as 2 separate projects. Our project documents never change. It's still one set of drawings, one set of specifications, but there's 2 building permits, one for each of those buildings. Because of scheduling needs for Missouri Foundation for Health, the Columbia Iron Works building was the first building that we pursued. We needed to get them into that building as the lease on their previous space was going to expire. As we got to a certain stage in that work, we were ready for the Tower Grove building. We started doing that work in the Tower Grove building. The Missouri Foundation for Health retained another contractor to come in and deal with all the environmental factors that were needing to be addressed there. A consultant was brought in to audit that building, went through it completely. A contractor came in and took care of all the asbestos that was found in the building. We thought we were ready to go. We started working on it some more, and we found a very remote area that nobody had ever noticed that had some bird droppings in there. We attempted to get the abatement contractor to come back in and deal with the bird droppings. They wouldn't. They came back to take a look at it. They saw the condition of the building and how it had deteriorated over the course of time. They wouldn't come back in. We eventually found an abatement contractor that would take care of that, and did. We proceeded with the work some more. And during that process, the back end of the building literally crumbled to the ground. And that's what you've seen the photographs of. So at the foundation's direction, HBD went out and very quickly rented some scaffolding, installed the scaffolding to stop the failure of the building. We thought we had it addressed at that point. We then continued around and started doing work on other sides of the building, and we're noticing details there that hadn't existed before. It's not a matter of us not having discovered them before or noticed them before. They didn't exist before. Walls that were plumb were no longer plumb or vertical. The building was bowing in areas that weren't bowing. We said that to HBD, we recognize that you can't build the project, the 20% of this that pertain to the Tower Grove building as you're under contract to do, because it can't physically be done. So we then consulted HOK about going in and assessing the building. Again, we had done it before, and we all came, to the professional opinion, HOK, HBD, and myself, it wasn't safe to put people in this building. So that's really where we are at this point. We continue to see changes in it. We have concern about not just the future of the building, but those that are by the building. As I look to see people standing out there waiting for the bus, standing out there and just hanging out, whatever it is, we became very concerned, and that's when we approached the city staff again and said, here's our concern. We believe that that it's somewhat likely that bricks are going to start falling off this building. And the city staff agreed with us. So as of about 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, I guess it was, we actually got city approval. We submitted an appropriate plan and so forth of where we would increase the fall zone to. We made sure that we put signage out there that complies with the federal standards. The manual and uniform traffic control devices was consulted. And we believe that we have set up as safe of an area as we can. And of all the things that we can control, the structural failure, the continuing structure failure is not on that list. So that's where we are. And I thought it was important that the board be aware of all these details, because as I sat here in the audience at the last meeting and listened to the presentation and comments from others who were here and not a part of the presentation, but members of the audience, it became very clear to me that nobody realized any of the detail and the work that had gone into this. It's not as if we walked up to it 2 months ago and said, I don't think we can do this. Walking away from all that's been invested in this is a tough thing to do. But as I give my guidance to the foundation, I believe it's the only thing to do. To try and rebuild this building, it literally, it has to come down in one form or another and be rebuilt in one form or another. Thank you.
Questions from this side?
Mr. Gartenberg, I don't know if you're willing to share this, but just, can you give any kind of an order of magnitude of the amount of money that's been invested in the plans to rebuild that building? I mean, just round numbers.
Sure.
'Cause I think what you're up against here is, we get a lot of folks in here who come in and say, oh, it can't be done, you know, we gotta tear this thing down, you know, they bring in structural reports, whatever. But you're the first to bring in a roll that big to show that you've done some work. So I'm just curious, like, and maybe your foundation doesn't want to share these financials, you don't have to answer the question, but what's gone into this set that you're about to cast aside?
That building in of itself, the effort that's gone into it thus far, my estimate is somewhere between $150,000 to $200,000 of design work.
Design fees.
There's also been construction work which has been performed by HBD, and you know, it's certainly is through no fault of their own that the building has deteriorated as it has. So they've been paid 6 figures of work that will be wasted work, plus the you know, the environmental analysis and abatement is probably a very large 5-figure number.
Okay. Thank you.
Questions on my left? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike. As I mentioned, we have 2 members of our team from HOK with us today. We have Stephen Crane, who's the structural engineer, and the commission heard from Stephen last time. In talking with Dan, we thought it might be better to have Barb Anderson-Curlin speak to the plans for what the renovated building, the new building would look like. But Stephen is here if you have any questions to that, to the other aspects of it as well.
Hi, good evening. I'm Barb Anderson-Curlin. I am a senior project manager with HOK. And as Jill mentioned previously, I've been working on this project since 2015. And just so that everybody understands, when we came to first start working on this project, searching for properties with the foundation, it was really a big part of their mission to find property like this that they could renovate, that had been vacant for a while, that they could really go into a neighborhood and make a difference. So we were really excited whenever they found this property, and this was the project they decided to move forward with. I think just, you know, we've done our due diligence that we felt completing the construction documents to save the building. You know, we've had structural analysis done both prior to the collapse and after the collapse. We've really spent a lot of time talking with the foundation, with HBD, with Mike, you know, what can we do to preserve this building? Can it happen? And then just moving forward and realizing that that can't be done, and, you know, what would we do as a design to replace this building, and just felt that keeping the existing historical character and everything, especially of that Tower Grove facade, would be important. So just in working with my team, with the foundation, on a design that would be appropriate for that corner, that would also tie into the Columbia Ironworks building and its renovation. So from the beginning, this was planned to be a 3-building complex campus for the foundation. I don't know if we can go back to the site plan, but it shows there's outdoor areas that connect all 3 buildings. There's part of the function for the foundation's daily building that was to be located in that initial Tower Grove building.
What would you point to that's different between what we're looking at today and what we saw last month?
Dan mentioned that there were some comments regarding the height of the building not being the same, and we had in fact taken out about 18 inches in height, and also the mansard was slightly different. So we went back and did, you know, the best that we could to replicate what's there in both height, angle, proportion, etc. And then also last time we did not have the same character on the front mansard on Tower Grove. We didn't show the windows, and actually the mansard wrapped all the way around the building. We had looked at a couple options with the foundation on how to do that, and also with Forest Park Southeast. Then in speaking with Dan, you know, his recommendation was to go ahead and stop the mansard in the same place that it wraps on Vista, and then bring the brick wall up as well to more accurately replicate what's there now.
Do you and your team like this design?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Questions on this side?
Will there actually be a third floor up there now?
No.
No, so that's a very tall second floor.
Yeah, and it's basically because the foundation doesn't need the space. They're willing to renovate it and utilize it, but they don't need that much square footage.
And I'm sorry, one more question before the Commissioner Richardson. So did you more or less replicate the height, the proportions? We're looking at the same building, you're putting it back?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Except for the rear. Yeah, so the rear didn't change from what you saw last time, so that's why we were just kind of focused on this corner and the Tower Grove facade.
Thank you.
So have you done the construction documents on this new building then?
No.
Okay.
No, just this conceptual rendering.
And so what would be the time frame of, we approve demolition tonight?
I'd say about 3 months or so. There's going to be a lot of work with HBD on historical replication, bricks, other elements to the building, and how we can achieve that.
Okay. And then what about the 1408 building? Have construction documents been done for that building?
Yes, and permit has been received.
Okay. And so that one, this says July, anticipate executing contracted, so the contract was, if you got a permit, you execute the contract, right? To start?
Yes, for the second building.
1408.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Vines, you were our leader last month. You have a question this time?
No, I mean, I think you answered most of the questions I would have had. It would be great to see a side-by-side comparison between last month's rendering and this one, just so I could visualize what's changed. The revision.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners on this side? Commissioner Hamilton?
Everyone should come with visuals like that.
Yeah, agreed. Robinson?
Tell me when I can ask about the Missouri Foundation for Health. Am I the only one that doesn't know what they do?
Immediately after the meeting.
Okay. Can you-
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
And they shouldn't have had to go through this.
Also this evening, we have a few folks from Forest Park Southeast and our neighbors who I think would like to say a few words. Abdullah, did you?
Yeah, you did.
Patrick, would you? Thank you.
Now they spent several $100,000 a month.
Patrick Brown, Forest Park Southeast resident for the last 10 years, member of the Park Central Development Committee, and actually former longtime member of the Planning Commission. So I appreciate the work that you all do. I miss getting some of the demo denials from you and having an opportunity to take a look at that work. So I do appreciate how thorough you all are and the amount of effort and time that you put into these types of reviews. I'm here really tonight to represent the actions of the Development Committee. We sent a letter of support for this demolition, but it was not easily sent by our group. We have a number of other residents, business owners, developers themselves, like Guy Slay, who pride themselves of being part of the Forest Park Southeast or the Grove, who've purchased homes, rehabbed homes within the neighborhood because of the historic character and the value that we all feel that has for our specific neighborhood and really like neighborhoods all across the city. And so this request of MFH for support for this demolition was not well received at first, not until we understood the details, which I also appreciate you all are looking for. And I believe our support came contingent upon, I'll say, a one-to-one sort of redesign and rebuild of the existing building. Which happily I feel like we now have. And so I thank you for the time that you all put into the review, the questions that you ask, and also the work of MFH to get us to this point. I think we're fortunate to have a foundation like this in possession of this type of building with this type of issue. because I think it's unlikely that another owner would actually have the resources to do the amount of work that they've done to get this to the point that we are at this evening. And so it obviously came at great expense and a lot of dead trees. But, you know, Forest Park Southeast and our collective neighborhood will be better off for having this building back where it is. Like I said, I've been in the neighborhood for 10 years. I've walked past this building almost, you know, weekly for that period of time, and have looked for something to kind of be bright in those windows, and I think we finally have that opportunity. So again, I thank you for your consideration this evening, and if you have any questions, happy to go there too. Otherwise, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question.
For Patrick?
Yeah, I have a question for Patrick. It's kind of more of a statement, but I'll make it into a question for you, Richard. Well, so I would just, you know, I appreciate that you are on the planning commission, and so you know what we go through here, and that the preservation board is a quasi-judicial body, and that we don't make policy or laws, that we, you know, have to enforce the historic district ordinance and the historic preservation review district ordinance. And so there was a tweet that Park Central put out that basically said that after the last meeting that we took away the community's voice. And, you know, we love to hear from the community and want to hear from the community, but at the same time, we can't be arbitrary and capricious, and we can't make our decisions based on, you know, what the community wants. It has to be based on, you know, the ordinance that we are enforcing. And if we didn't do that, you know, the whole basis of our preservation laws would be, you know, illegal, unconstitutional, and arbitrary. And so I know you get that because you're on the planning commission, but, you know, I mean, we do take our job seriously up here. And I'm going to try to make this into a question, Richard. So you understand all that, don't you, Mr. Brown?
I believe I do.
Thank you.
I guess what I would say to that is that Twitter tends to not be a great medium for fully, you know, getting your intended point across. But I think that generally speaking, there tends to be a misunderstanding about the roles that you all play. And what binds you to those roles, and the oath that you all take to do this job for free for multiple hours on a monthly basis, and the binders of work that staff put in to help inform those decisions that you make. And so, you know, when communities and neighbors and even developers put in a like amount of work, they get defensive about it and often like to not have to do this multiple times. But frankly, I'm of the opinion that we have a better project today as a result of your work. And so I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Imran? Welcome back.
Thanks for tolerating me again. Imran Hanafi, 4464 Maryland Avenue.
I meant to say last time, your presentation last time was very thorough.
Thank you. I don't have any pictures this time.
It's okay.
So I do appreciate the clarification that MFH has provided. You know, I always think of the next step, like what is, in my mind, like what are the questions there are? And two, well, one is a recurrent question when I come to these meetings. You know, we decided a building is structurally unsound, whether it's the, you know, Peevely or Couples, whatever. Why isn't there ever a plan B of saving the facade and building behind it? There's never, this is all or nothing. The building either stands or it falls. There's never a proposal to say, let's build up a whole new building and save the facade, which is the most valuable part of it for the community outside. So, I mean, you see it all over the world. They put metal scaffolding and put modern buildings inside. I mean, but it's always, we say, can't be saved, that's it. There's never this other plan B. I talked about it when the Barnes buildings came down. I talked about it with the Peevely. So that's one part that I feel like is maybe missing in our ordinance. Why isn't there a formal process of, okay, you can't do plan A, we get it. Why not plan B? Well, my second concern was about the building next door, and I'm glad you got that clarified, because we would hate to come back in a year to say, hey, guess what? That building now has, you know, mortar that's like powder. and we can't save it. And I'm blanking out on my second point. Great. I am concerned that the proportions of the new building will be a little off. I'm concerned that the windows will be obscured and it'll be just back offices, or something, hallways in the back. I don't know how those details are, looked after. Maybe Dan's office can make sure whatever gets built is of value to the sidewalk, because that's where security and activity comes from. And thirdly, I just can't shake the idea that in a different ownership, we would have had a different outcome. It's not like this building was ever put out for sale and to see who wants to take it on. I was never an option. There's one owner, and it's only what that one owner can do. I shared what we did with pretty dire circumstances, and I feel like I have the resources. I mean, I can pool the resources, I can make it happen, but I don't think I would ever get the chance because an institution has decided this is the place that they're going to be. So just those are my thoughts. Thought I would share them.
Questions on my left? Questions on my right? Thank you. Maud?
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Maud Essen. I'm a longtime resident of Forest Park Southeast, about 35 years. So I was there during the crack epidemic, during the times of the muggings and the shootings. And I stayed because I knew that it was a neighborhood that would develop. And also I have a connection to it. My grandfather was a student at Adams School in the late 1800s. So it's not like, this was a big family compound area for my family, but it's a place that I feel very comfortable with and call home. The reason I wanted to come talk to you today, and I would like also to agree with what Imran said. I feel reassured by the fact that the building next door is not as likely to suffer the same fate as this one. I was worried about that before I came here today. I am also in agreement with what Imran said about retaining the facade. This is very commonly done, and what makes it so desirable to use such an approach in this situation is to retain not only the brick around the top of the facade, but also the shape of the windows, etc. There are details there that just can't be reproduced easily or economically. And I do understand that retaining a facade has economic impacts. However, I really do hope that we can start to take care of that kind of thinking in the future. I often, and I'll just share a personal thought with you, I often feel like in the city of St. Louis we have an inferiority complex as a general cultural thing that we do here, where when somebody is willing to develop a property for us, we're so grateful that we're like the fat girl at the prom, which is a topic that I'm familiar with. Fat girls at proms are so happy that someone is dancing with them that they sometimes ignore the way they're being treated. And I'm not pointing the finger at this organization that's with us today, but I am saying that in general, we tend to do that in this city. We're so grateful that somebody's going to fix a building that we have, that we allow them to let the roof go bad so that it can rot, and then we can be told that the only thing that can be done is to tear it down. I've seen this so many times, and it's a disappointment, and I just would encourage all of you to feel that you can say that people need to behave in a way that is appropriate, whether they are individual developers or developers with deep pockets, and they need to follow the same rules. And in the same way that we care a lot about the paint on a building on Laclede. We need to care equally for a building that of importance like this. Corner buildings are always the best. So I thank you and hope that you will consider that in the future.
Ask. Okay. Commissioners, that concludes the testimony on this subject. Jill, do you have anything you wanted to say at the end?
No, I'll say, again, thanks, but mostly thanks to our team. The last month, we really have tried very hard to take from Dan what we can to try to move forward appropriately. We are very anxious to move forward, and with all respect to everyone who has an opinion about how we should move forward, I just want to assure everyone we have looked at all those options. I'm not the professional that does it, but I'm in every meeting, and there's been lots of meetings and lots of discussions, and we truly are bringing forward what we think is not only the best way to move forward, but essentially the only way to move forward to build something that we can have for hundreds of years and take care of. And this building wasn't taken care of for many years, and we're seeing the results of that. And we want to get there, we want to be there, we want to be in it, we want to be part of the neighborhood, and we want to take care of the building appropriately, and appreciate your consideration.
Thank you. Alderman?
Then I would actually like to make a motion that the Preservation Board approve the demolition of 14,000 Tower Grove Avenue.
1,400.
1,400. 1,400 Tower Grove Avenue, taking into consideration the enhanced design changes since the June 24th, 2019 meeting, and that the building's structurally condemned, and the application of the criteria F and G, and with the conditions of the CRO staff is consulted regarding final design details, and the demolition permit is granted only after issuance of a building permit.
Second.
State that just quickly for the record, that the Preservation Board approved the demolition of 1,400 Tower Grove Avenue, taking into consideration the enhanced design changes since the June 24th, 2019 meeting, the building's structural condition, and the application of criteria F and G, and with the conditions that the CRO staff is consulted regarding final design details, and a demolition permit be granted only after the issuance of a building permit on the site. Was that your motion?
Yes.
And was that the motion seconded?
And I am seconding.
Okay, good. Discussion. Commissioners on the right?
Would you entertain just tightening it a little bit to say that the CRO staff is consulted and approves the final design details, just so that we?
Sure. Okay with the second?
Yes.
Counselor, do you have that?
Yes.
Okay.
Go
ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say that I thought testimony was very compelling, and my heart is right there. Sometimes that's at odds with my brain, and the realism of being able to do these projects the way I feel they should be done. I agree with you. I don't really think I think the age of the faux historic new construction has come and gone. This is not really relevant to our purview of this process, though. In essence, we don't build historic buildings. They become historic because they're built of a certain era to reflect a certain era, and they do it authentically and really well. And I would love to see future new development embrace more innovative, more modern, timely elements. That said, I do think that the revised rendering is vastly improved. Checks most of the boxes that I was most concerned about. And I sincerely appreciate the effort that went into the revisions and your commitment to the neighborhood. So I am comfortable with it.
Further comments?
Yes, sir. From a design perspective, last month, I think we were concerned that it was sort of not quite there as a replica of what's there now, and we challenged the design team and the ownership to consider either going all the way and replicating what's there, or maybe going with a contemporary approach. And I think you've done a good job. It's when you selected option A. Option B, I'm sure you could have nailed too. So we appreciate it.
Commissioners on this side?
Yeah, I would, one, reiterate what Commissioner Colleen noted. And just for the record, we have actually saved facades as a board previously. And also note that as a board, we are not the fat girl at the prom.
He noted it. I'm not sure that that is correctly applied. But I understood the metaphor when presented and often agree. Anything else, commissioners? Thank you for your patience. Commissioners, there's a motion on the floor. It's been made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Let's do agenda item E, 6211 Delmar.
The lady that's recused on this mentioned.
Commissioner Richardson reminds us that he has recused himself on consideration of this matter.
Just accept any development, and we.
Still don't know what Missouri
You better go catch him.
Oh, they're gonna leave.
Okay, so,
You're not gonna
so
know.
when Blue Cross
Technology,
became a for-profit company,
girl at the prom, and so.
the state, in order to let them out of
Because
the
I
nonprofit
listened.
status, required them to deposit a huge amount of money.
No, because then you didn't, then you would know.
And that's the endowment that they
Thank
work
you.
from.
Now I understand.
And they work on health policy and programs.
Thank you.
They used to be at Union Station, which is now going to be something else. It is. Why did they build it in a hole?
In the corner.
I drive that all the time, I'm like.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Director Krasnoff.
I'm not a potted plant. I will begin. So this is a proposal for a sign at 6211 Delmar. This is a new application. So this is a official application, not a preliminary review, but no action has been taken on this by the staff. The staff recommendation is to grant approval for the sign as submitted. And let's look at some pictures. So this is a rendering of 6211 Delmar Boulevard. So this is the corner, the northwest corner of Delmar and Skinker. So it's a pretty prominent corner. I suspect folks on the board are probably somewhat familiar with this. There used to be a Shell gas station on this corner. The Preservation Board saw the preliminary review. Actually, I think it saw a building permit application, for a preliminary and then a building permit application for the building you see here in the rendering. It also, staff has gone ahead and approved demolition of 2 buildings on the site. The site is now being prepared for construction. So what we have here tonight is the consideration of a sign which will go at the corner of the building, which says "Link in the Loop." And go to our next slide. So this is a map of the area. You see the area in the box is where the new building will be constructed, and the area in tan, dark tan, is the Skinker de Bolivar Certified Local Historic District, which means it's both a National Register district and a local district all at the same time. This is just a picture of the site to prove to you all that when I said it's under construction now, I wasn't kidding. Here's a rendering of the building looking east on Skinker, and you can see up in the corner there, I don't know where our
East on Delmar, you mean?
spotter is. Where is it? Oh, there it is, way under there. Okay. So this is our sign that we're looking at tonight right here at this point. This is a kind of a close-up of that sign. You can see on the lower left how it will be affixed to the building. It says Lincoln. It's a very colorful sign. This is a sign with animation, but I was unable to make the animation work for the PowerPoint, which I apologize for.
It's working. It's actually blinking.
Is it moving? It is moving. Wow, I'm better at this than I thought. So let's talk about the standards for a second. So the Skinker de Bolivar Historic District has new standards as of a year or two ago. And the standards have very specific standards for existing structures. And the only place where the standards really address signs in the new construction section are actually in a place where there's language that says all new construction within the historic district shall be compatible with nearby historic buildings and the historic district as a whole. A new building shall not have elements or materials that are visually dominant being capitalized with the V and the D. So the real standard here is this sign visually dominant or not? And as the director, I would say it is not. You can see this section of the loop, the east loop, has been developing rapidly over the last 10 to 15 years. This is the Everly apartment building. You can see their sign here that lights up very bright at night. And then, and Richard, this is the one I want you to see.
Ready?
We have the trolley.
Which one's the trolley? Is it the one that's not moving?
Really?
There you go. I wanted to give you your cheap shot at the trolley, and you took it. So you also see here the pageant sign is very bright and robust, as well as the moonrise sign. You've got the Tivoli sign down the street. And I think we're coming to a period now where our commercial districts, you think about the Grove especially, and Washington Avenue, are really being enlivened by the bold signs that are being placed on those buildings. And therefore, I would say with the signs that are currently on the corridor, this is not visually dominant. I do think it's appropriate. I do think it's appropriately scaled for the building, which is nice. And therefore, the staff recommendation is to support this proposal. I will say additionally that I do have an email. I don't have a copy of it, but I do have an email with Alderman Heather Navarro's support for this project as well. And that concludes my remarks.
Questions on the side?
I have a motion.
We've got two people to speak. Matthews and McGuire, who are you? Where are you? Are you for this or against this?
We're for it.
Okay. Any questions? Motion?
That the Preservation Board grant approval for the proposed sign as submitted.
Second.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And, unless you want to try to dissuade us. Okay, commissioners, let's do agenda item F, 4130 Shaw. Whoops, hold on. Commissioners, we are now going to reconstitute ourselves to hear appeals of denials. Verify that we have a quorum present. I will ask witnesses to tell us that they're telling the truth and to identify themselves, and for staff to submit everything that they want into the record, also introducing themselves and affirming that they will tell the truth. Did that work?
Yes.
Okay.
More of the Cultural Resources Office, and I swear to tell the truth. I would also like to submit into the record the PowerPoint, the agenda, and also our enabling ordinance 64689 as amended by 64925, as well as the Shaw Standards Ordinance 59400. This is 4130 Shaw Boulevard, and it is an appeal of the director's denial to retain the front door and windows installed without a permit. It is located in the Shaw Neighborhood Local Historic District. And the applicant has removed the original double entry with mullion and transoms and installed a pre-hung front door and side lights. He's also installed inappropriately paired windows on the front facade. All work was done without approved permit. The owner has applied to retain the non-compliant work, and the application was denied as the Shaw Neighborhood Standards specify that both windows and doors should be in the same vertical and horizontal proportions and style as the original structures. And as you can see, here's the new door. Single door with side lights, and then appropriate windows installed. And then this is a Google image from 2017 showing the original doors and their configuration, as well as the windows before they were replaced. And they were large 1/1 instead of paired 1/1s. And here is the rest of the block for comparison. Here is also a double entry door, as well as on the other side. Again, double entry door. And then some across the street as well. Again, according to the standards, doors and windows and openings on both new and renovated structures should be in the same vertical and horizontal proportions in style as in the original structures. What has been installed does not meet those standards. And as well as replacement windows and door frames should be limited to wood and color finished aluminum, and these are vinyl windows. The Cultural Resources Office recommends that the Preservation Board uphold the director's denial as the door and windows installed without a permit do not meet the Shaw Neighborhood standards.
Questions on this side? Testimony clear to this side? Anything else you'd like to submit? Okay, thank you. Let's hear from the appellant, please. Good afternoon. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. My name is Eric Hanson. I am a citizen of St. Louis City. This is the third house that I've had, the first one that I've actually had the opportunity to rehab. As such, yes.
I'll do that, unless you want.
No, just making sure.
Do you want to swear me in?
No.
Okay. Where can we find you again?
I'm at 6901 Southwest Avenue.
And is your testimony going to be the truth?
Yes.
Okay. So tell us what you want us to do and make your case, submitting for the record everything that you believe supports it.
Okay. So my intention when rehabbing this house was to preserve the historical character of the home. The reason I love St. Louis so much is the brickwork and just some of the historical charm. When I bought this house, it was in the middle of a reconstruction. And I made some decisions that I shouldn't have. I made some mistakes that I shouldn't have, and I do apologize, and I take full ownership of that. I got permits where I thought were necessary, but clearly I should have been also keeping an eye with the Cultural Resources Office, and I wasn't aware of the historical permits for front doors and windows, and so I do apologize at that, and I'm hoping for some grace tonight. With regards to the front door, there were originally two front doors. Both of them were irreparable. As far as their original condition, one of them was completely disassembled by the prior owners. The second one was in a state of disrepair that wouldn't have been able to be refinished. We're going to have to be replaced. As such, I made the decision to try to find replacement doors. The store that I found was picked up from Restore, Habitat for Humanity, and installed by a contractor, as well as the windows. I wasn't notified that I would need a permit for any of those. If we can go to the next slide. So this is, on the left is the picture beforehand of the two front doors, the states they were in, and I apologize, I don't have better pictures than that. And then on the right is what it looks like after the rehab. If you go to the next picture, next slide. So these are the doors as you're going down the block. The one right next to it is a vacant property that's been vacant for a few years, boarded up, does have two doors. The one next to it also was originally two doors, with one covered by some sort of wood siding, paneling, to become just a single front door. And then the two buildings after that are single doors with some sort of side light accents next to them. I will point out the block that this house is on is a mixed block, some single-family homes, some two-family homes. And so there is some variety, and I do feel like the current exterior matches the style of the block on a whole. And then if we go on the next slide, we can talk about the windows. The 3 windows in the front are the only wood windows that were in the house. I guess I should have taken that as a hint as to why they were left. But the panes of glass in all the windows were loose. I had a couple different window contractors come out, told me that they wouldn't be able to reglaze the windows, that they would have to be replaced. When I went to replace them, I was told that in that size, there was no way to get it 1/1. And so that's why you see the 2/2 configuration. On the old windows, they did have the 1/1 configuration for the 2 right side windows, although the storm door on the first level did give the 2/2 a physical appearance. If you go to the next slide. And these are other windows in the neighborhood on the same side of the street that sort of match the style. Well, the first one doesn't match the style, but those are, the first 2 images show vinyl windows, which are also on that block. And then there are several other examples of 2/2 windows, which would be consistent with the style that I installed. And then if we go to the final slide. And again, my intention isn't to try to argue that I've totally matched the standards. I understand that I haven't. But within the standards, it talks about using these regulations not to discourage any sort of contemporary design, which through careful attention to scale, materials, siting, and landscaping is harmonious with the existing historic structures. I hope that I have shown that it is harmonious with the other structures on that block. It also says the intent of the ordinance is to decrease the density of housing units within the neighborhood without demolishing buildings. Whenever feasible, they should remain the same amount or less living units as the building was originally designed. And in this case, we did convert it from a 2-family to a single family. And so I feel, again, like that was in line with those standards. So that concludes my opinions. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Commissioners on this side? No questions. Commissioners on this side? You have your question.
So it was a 2-family and now it's a single family.
Mm-hmm.
Do you intend to live there or?
No, I intend to sell it. I've got another house that I'm living at in the city.
Okay. I was just curious. So that's good. I like single family.
You didn't ask your normal question.
Oh, well, I could. Yes, I do. Have you talked to the alderman?
I have not talked to Alderman Rice, no.
Okay. It was more, I just like the idea it's being confirmed from a 2 to a single family. Okay. But you're right.
Anything else you'd like to submit?
No.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fathman, have you got a motion?
Well, I move that the Preservation Board uphold the director's denial as the door and windows installed without a permit do not meet the Shaw neighborhood standards.
Second.
Discussion, this side?
I would ask for a roll call vote, though.
There's been a motion for a roll call vote, which we will do. Commissioners, any other discussion? Hearing none, I will call a roll. There's a motion on the floor that has been made and seconded. Commissioner Fathman, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Killeen, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Vines, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
And Vaccaro, do you vote
Be a no.
yes or no?
I'll be a no. I think it looks good.
Okay, there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 yes votes, 1 no vote. The motion carries. The Preservation Board has upheld the director's denial. Let's call agenda item G, which is 3243 Indiana.
I got this.
Is the
It does look nice.
Anytime somebody takes a 2-family and turns it into a single-family home, I think that's good for a neighborhood. I think home ownership versus rental.
I heard that.
So,
But I think the issue is, like, the vinyl windows are one of the big ones, and that shouldn't be too outrageous. He talks to them, maybe. Is there
Yeah, I just,
vinyl windows?
I can do that.
I got vinyl windows in my house.
I'm telling you, but you were grandfathered in, right?
No, I'm not in preservation. But everybody on my block's got nice vinyl windows.
Come on.
Did you say my name?
No.
Technical difficulties. Not connecting to the.
I was so proud of myself. I got to the thing and then.
I think he was, a little bit
No,
scored. I
no,
think
don't do
he
that.
was in trouble on his downtown property.
Hold on, I have to get to my slide,
Oh,
please.
yeah. Bad
Oh,
juju.
we're past it. Okay. Which side do I slide?
Why did they have to get in trouble? And his
into
resources.
new and go to current slide.
I know, people love that place. It was great.
You guys scored a major one.
First slide show.
Big one. Yeah, for sure.
Current slide. There it is. From current slide.
That's a catalyst for,
There you go.
All right.
yeah, it's on the far east side.
My degree's not in audio visual. All right. My name's Dan Krasnoff. I'm the Director of Cultural Resources for the City of St. Louis, and I swear to tell the truth. So we're here to hear a appeal of the denial of 3243 Indiana Avenue. I'd like to enter the following items into the record. Ordinance 64689. Ordinance 64832. Ordinance 64925, which is there. Ordinance 67175, which is the Benton Park Local Historic District Ordinance. I'd like to enter into the record the application for the approval of the application seeking the demolition, and also into the record the denial of that demolition, which is inside the demolition application paperwork. I'd like to enter into the record the PowerPoint presentation you're all about to hear. Into the record an appeal of the denial by Jim Goff. A letter of opposition to the demolition by the Benton Park Neighborhood Association. And finally, a copy of the southern portion of the National Register District map with a circle of the building in question, and then a local, or a blow-up section of the part right, the blocks where the demolition is proposed, with the building identified in a circle. So with that, I will state that the staff recommendation is the Preservation Board uphold the director's denial of the demolition because the building is a contributing resource to the Benton Park Local Historic District and National Register Historic District. At that point, I will show the slides. So this is our building at 3243 Indiana Avenue. There's a lot of trees in front of this building. It makes it hard to get a really good, straightforward picture of it, but this is the best I could get. This is a site plan showing the building on the block. So this is near a couple of different parks. So Benton Park is just at the end of the block, across the street at the end of the block up here. And then you have Carnegie Place Park, which is a 2-block long park space that you'll see in the pictures in a moment. And then you have the buildings, the block in question here. The owner lives the building just to the south of 3243 and the applicant. And then, of course, you have 3243 itself, which is surrounded by the dashed lines. On the left is the front southeast facade of the building. It should not say wall down there. I don't know why that says that.
That me?
On the right is a picture of the south facade of the building, and as you can see, I don't even need the pointer for that, there is a part of the building missing. And that happened when there was demolition going on, both at the alley and for which there was a demolition permit granted, and of a small, not historic gazebo that used to be next to the building here. That was being demolished as well. There was no permit for that. And the way the definitions read in the ordinances we're working from is that the demolition of any structure in the district requires a permit. So the gazebo being a structure, really there should have been a demolition permit for that as well. And there you see the best picture I could get of the north facade, which is intact, and a bad picture of the back of the building, but I will testify that that is intact as well. Just to go back to the slide on the right here, the collapse of that, according to the owner, and they're here to testify for themselves, but I was told by them that that vibrations and things from the construction equipment that was already on the site caused the building there to, the portion of the wall to collapse. So now I'll just show you some context slides. This is looking south on Indiana, so the building in question is, you can barely see a portion of the roof of it there on the right-hand side of this picture. Now we're looking on the east side of Indiana at the park space that I mentioned earlier, the Carnegie Park, I think it's called. And now you're looking north at the, in the west side of Indiana, across from Carnegie Park, and in the distance there you see Benton Park itself off in the distance. And there's 2- and 3-story structures on the block there that are all, I think virtually every building on the block, with the exception of maybe one institutional building, is a contributing building to the Benton Park National Register Historic District and the local historic district as well. Here's a map of the southern half of the Benton Park Local District. You can see the little black circle up there at the top is a circle of the building we're talking about today, 3243 Indiana. And then here's a closer up picture of it. The reason I'm pointing this out is because the building has the date of it on the building and a notation for its historical period. It is a contributing building to the district. So for example, the building down here with the asterisk is not a contributing building to the district. And I want to testify that this is a contributing building because it's important to the case being made today. So those are the images of the building I wanted to show. Now I wanted to go through the criteria in the ordinance. I'm going to mainly focus on Ordinance 64689 because the local district ordinance is based on that with some modifications. We are charged with making a determination as to the significance of the building, and based on the historic district nomination, we determine that this is a merit building. It is a contributing building to the district. We do not feel, the staff does not feel it would be a building that would be individually eligible for the district, but it is one of the collection of thousands of buildings in the Benton Park neighborhood that contribute to the historical character of the district. And going through the criteria A is redevelopment plans. This is not in a redevelopment area. Criteria B is architectural quality. As I said, it's a merit building, a contributing building to the National Register and local district. C, under condition, the definition of a sound building is a building that the walls and roof will remain standing for 6 months. I believe that even with the significant damage that this building has suffered, that it will continue standing for 6 months, which would allow time for the rehabilitation of the building. There is no attached building here, so that criterion doesn't matter. The next criterion is neighborhood effect and reuse potential. This portion of the Benton Park District, I surveyed it when I was out there. Almost all, if not all, buildings in this vicinity seem to be occupied, and the buildings are generally in good repair. And I would say the conditions are ripe in this part of the Benton Park neighborhood for rehabilitation and the investment in property. Next is Reeves Potential. This is a building in the National Register District, I believe, and I'm very confident that it would be eligible for historic tax credits that could reduce the cost of development by as much as 25 to 30% in this area for the building, which I think is a very significant number when all the evidence is considered today. I've been presented no evidence of economic hardship. Under E, urban design, I would say the blocks here are largely intact and the urban design of the historic neighborhood is in place. The next criteria is that this building is not the most ornate structure, I will grant you, but it is a historic building dating from the early 20th century and therefore does contribute to the district. The next criteria is proposed subsequent construction, which is criterion F. The applicant has demonstrated site control, that's for sure they have. And then the next criteria is the proposed construction would equal or exceed the quality of the existing building. The proposal, I believe, is for a side yard on the site. So I don't see how a side yard could equal or exceed the contribution of the existing building. There is some language about parking and the expansion of parking in the district. However, they are not proposing parking, and that's kind of would seem to be written more with a commercial situation in mind. The side yard that's being proposed is certainly something that could be allowed under the current zoning. There's no question about that. The next criteria is commonly controlled property, and I will say that let me read the language for that. If a demolition application concerns property adjoining occupied property, and if common control of both properties is documented, favorable consideration will generally be given to appropriate reuse proposals. Appropriate uses shall include those allowed under the current zoning classification, reuse for expansion of an existing conforming commercial or industrial use or use consistent with the presently conforming or adjoining use groups. Potential for substantial expansion of existing adjacent commercial use will be given due consideration. This is commonly there is commonly controlled property here. The owners live in the building to the south, and the building to the north is the building we're talking about today. They abut one another. However, I would also point out the commonly controlled property language. We hear the word commercial and industrial more than one time, and industrial in that paragraph as well. And I don't think the use, I think when the writers of this ordinance were doing it, they were thinking about the expansion of commercial activities that could increase economic activity, and that really wouldn't qualify or apply to this case. Let me conclude by backing up a step and talking about some of the language in the ordinance. So as we've reviewed a lot of these demolitions, and as the board members know, the ordinance says for a demolition to be approved, there must be of a merit qualifying or high merit building, there have to be unusual circumstances that are shown. And this is an unusual, I don't want to use that word unusual too much. This is an interesting situation because actually this is one where there's an unusual circumstance kind of on the other side of it. And that is that our office has had some conversation with the building commissioner, and the building commissioner is in a position to reconstruct the southern wall of this building, whether the owner chooses to or not. So if the southern wall of this building is reconstructed, then it would be the judgment of the Cultural Resources Office that this building definitely maintains its reuse potential, and that therefore there really aren't unusual circumstances that justify the use of the building or the demolition of the building for a side yard. The other criteria in the ordinance refers to whether a set of criteria are met. And I just want to go through those very quickly. A is a redevelopment plan. We saw that is not, this is not in a redevelopment plan that calls for the building's demolition. D is reuse potential. I think the building has reuse potential. The area is also an area with significant redevelopment activity. And so I don't think that's a real place to go to look for where this is justified. F is proposed subsequent construction. Under F, the proposed new use does not equal or exceed the current use, and there's also no parking being proposed here, as far as I can tell, of a significant amount. And finally, the final criteria I'd go to is commonly controlled property. There is commonly controlled property. I could see where folks would think that that's something that's applicable here, but I would also emphasize a couple things. One is that there's quite a bit of mention of expansion of commercial uses, which this is not a commercial use, and therefore that criteria is not as relevant. So to sum up, I would seek that the board did uphold the director's denial, and with that, I'll take any questions.
So the building commissioner
That was gonna be my question.
rebuilding that wall, how does,
That's what he said.
no other information?
I'm merely quoting what the building commissioner has said.
I couldn't hear that question.
The question was, so the building commissioner said that he could rebuild that southern wall,
Okay,
and the director said yes.
okay.
And I don't really have other information regarding that statement. It's just a statement that's been made.
And the reason for the collapse was due to, according to the owners, due to vibration from tearing down the gazebo?
I think that's what they'll tell you during their, I've had a conversation. I think that's what they told me, but, you know, I'm always a little reluctant to speak for the applicants, but in this
Okay, I'll
case, I
ask
think
them.
that's what they'll say.
Thank you.
Just curious, so if the building commissioner, if the city built that wall, would they charge the,
Yes, my presumption is that they would charge the owner for that.
okay, I was just curious.
Anybody else on this side? Thank you. Okay, let's hear from the appellant. Appellants. Thank you very much for your patience.
So I am Jim Gao. I'm listed, I believe, as a co-applicant, and we have,
I'm Holly Nybert. I'm the owner of 3249 Indiana and the property in question.
Is your testimony going to be the truth?
yes.
Okay.
So we would like to submit into the record a PowerPoint prepared by us. I believe they have it pulled up. We submitted it to the Cultural Resources Office earlier today. Okay, so first, so the Cultural Resource Office has, you know, stated that it's a contributing building to the neighborhood. They've shown you the map. It is our position that it is a contributing building, but it's not, if you go to the next slide. There are properties listed in the State of Missouri Historic Inventory. You can see these are, I just listed the Indiana Avenue of the whole district. We've got 2600 block, 27, 28, 29, 3000. You get to 3200 block, which this is on. We've got 3213, 14, 15, 16, 17, 21, 31, and then it stops and skips to the 3300 block, which is just south. I've got pictures of the 3200 block properties, which we'll go through shortly.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. The next slide is the National Register of Historic Places nomination form. City Block 1524 is the block that this home is located on. As you can see, Carnegie Park is listed, which you saw pictures and you'll see some more of. 3226 to 24, 3220, 3216, 14, 15B are listed on here. Notice no 3243 listed on any of these, although it is, like you know, the director said, listed as contributing. Go to the next slide. So this is 3200 block facing north. The park is at the end of the street, Carnegie there on the right. If you look to the left really, really hard, you can see the roof line of 3249, which is our residence, and then 3241 to 39 is a duplex. You can see that in the far left background, just over the trees. There's a lot of street trees on this block. Go ahead, next slide. So 3259 is on the corner of Utah and Indiana. That is a vacant property currently. I believe it's condemned. Actually, a car hit the back of it. Behind that's a gas station. So 3259 is vacant, but you can see it as red brick, has some ornamental cornice work. 3253, next house down. Again, ornamental cornice work, red brick. Go ahead, next slide. There's 3251 and our residence, 4749. It was a duplex at one point. That's why the dual address. It's a single family now. As you can see on both of these, ornamental brickwork, arched windows. Ours has the roof line. I assume I'm not an architect, but I think that's a mansard, or at least a variation on a mansard. You can see 3239, the right picture. That's the duplex next to 3243. You can see in the corner of the picture there the subject property. Again, ornamental brickwork, red brick. Next slide. 3235, and you'll see marked E. That is the marked E is the craftsman designation in the National Historic Registry. So that is characterized as a craftsman home, bungalow style it looks to me, but red brick again. 3233, red brick. Go ahead and continue. 3227, ornamental archways, cornice. I can't remember. I think this is one of the ones listed in the Missouri inventory. No, it's not. But again, ornamental brickwork, red brick. 3221 to 23, that is also characterized as craftsman. Red brick on the front. You can see the ornamental above the windows, the inlaid brick, and the cornice work. Go ahead, next slide. 3219, very similar to the one next to it. Red brick, archway, ornamental, inlaid brick, cornice. 3215 is a yellow color now, but it is painted red brick. And that is on the registry due to the cornice work. I believe it's listed as brass and ornamental brick up there. Go ahead, next slide. 3213, same thing, painted red brick, very similar to the house that it's attached to. Across the street, 3214, red brick, ornamental. Next slide. 3216, you'll see there, that is vacant, it's condemned. But again, ornamental. 3220, same thing, red brick. And then the last couple slides here, go ahead. So that one, again, same thing, ornamental red brick. Then the Cherokee Rec Center, which is non-contributing. Next slide. You'll see the streetscape here, all the buildings down. So Benton Park would be just behind the photographer. But yeah, that's the streetscape on the north end of the street. Go ahead, next slide. And then here is looking looking north from the south end of the street. You'll see 3251, 49, the property, subject property there behind the trees. Again, a lot of street trees, and then Carnegie Park. And then next. And so here, as Director Krasnoff said, it's hard to see the property. So we would say that there's, and you can see the street tree pattern. It looks as though they're almost unusually dense in front of this property, so there would be a limited effect on the streetscape, in our opinion, if it were demolished. Okay, go ahead, next slide. So here is the craftsman description from the Historic Registry. So this is coded E. There were a couple more in the street. So the greatest number of buildings in this category are 2-story 20th century flats, typically 4 to 6 bays wide, housing 4 to 6 families. This one's a single family. The second paragraph there, segmental and round arched openings. These have rectangular window openings. And then they're replaced by unembellished rectangular openings and cornices, variously handled as simple projecting bands of terracotta, no terracotta, or inlaid brick patterning, which there is no inlaid brick patterning on this house. And then we've got a tiled overhanging pseudo roof on this one, but it's not tiled anymore due to renovations to it over the years. Again, this is not a flat. There's not a projecting front porch with craftsman gabled roofs or anything like that. So it's hard for us to understand why this is categorized as a craftsman in the National Registry. These rehab estimates are based on some online research, as well as the tuck pointing, for example. That line item is an estimate that we have a friend that got tuck pointing done on their house of a similar size, and that was their cost, $30,000. So we've got, if you can look at the line items there, roof, tuck pointing, the electrical's completely shot. They actually had extension cords in the property running overhead hanging light bulbs. And the panel downstairs is not up to code, so it would have to be it's basically a completely gut rehab. Our estimated costs on all the renovations would be about $247, plus some loan servicing to carry the costs. That interest we calculated at $9,200, which would put a total estimated cost at $256,804. The sale of the home we estimated at $130 a square foot, which is generous based on the comparable area homes listed on the right. 3239 and 3241 are directly next door in that duplex. They sold for $129 and $125 a square foot. 3215 is under contract at $123 a square foot. 2907 Indiana is just listed at $150 a square foot on the other side of the park, a newly constructed townhome. 2801 Indiana is listed at $106 a square foot. 2718 is pending contract at $122 a square foot. These are to illustrate that the cost of rehab under the ordinance, which should be taken into consideration, would be the equivalent to total reconstruction. Not to mention that we have a disclosure from the sellers that we purchased the property from, stating that there was prior termite and pest infestation, so we're not sure what problems we would run into as we got into the rehab. The cost of our proposed reuse as a side yard, including the purchase price, the demo, grading, seeding, and fencing is $59,000, which it's hard to estimate the increase in value to our adjoining property because there aren't many comps in the area of a lot that size, but we imagine it would increase our property value much more than $59,000. Next slide. And then this is just one block over at the edge of, or the corner of Missouri and Utah. There is a quadruple, I think it's actually 5. It's 3 single lots and a double lot, so I guess 5 lots with this 3251 Missouri on it, just showing that the neighborhood has large lots and side yards like we propose. Next slide. And then the final slide here is the commonly controlled property slide, the section of the ordinance. Director Krasnoff went through it, but it is our, we're both attorneys, and so we've looked at ordinances and statutes and construction before. So we are reading this as if a demolition application concerns property adjoining occupied property, this does. Favorable consideration will be generally given to appropriate reuse proposals. Appropriate uses shall include those under the current zoning classification. This is allowable under the zoning classification of multifamily residential. It has documented common control. So we do believe that this section applies and we should be given favorable consideration. We would like to make an objection to the neighborhood association, the building commission letter. We haven't seen that, so we're not sure if there is authority for them to act without showing of a resolution from the board officers. We're on the neighborhood association as well, and so.
Noted.
Yeah. We do have, so under section 24 of the St. Louis ordinances, this board should consider adjoining property owners. We have a petition that we circulated, and we have the signatures of 9 owners within 350 feet of the property that would support the demolition. We can submit that into the record. As well as an affidavit from me. That's the original there. Yeah, I've got copies.
The affidavit is that you collected the signatures?
Yeah, that they were all residents, and there are some renters on there, so there's a lot more signatures, but there's 9 owners for sure, according to the city records. The gazebo, we didn't apply for the permit. ZNL Wrecking did on our behalf. It's an ancillary structure. It's my understanding it probably would have been granted anyway. But we were under the impression that it was, along with the garage submitted for permit.
Is it your testimony that there was a permit issued or that you thought there was a permit
We
issued?
thought there was one. Like I said, we had no contact with the actual application process. We told ZNL, hey, we want this garage demoed because there was an arson.
If I had a nickel.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so, yeah, that's our testimony there. You know, again, according to or in line with my arguments on the property, Director Krasnoff said that, you know, the property itself would not be individually eligible. It's only because it's a contributing building to the district. Yeah, that's all. Any questions?
How did the collapse occur?
We weren't there. We're not sure. From what we were told by ZNL, it collapsed during the construction.
During the demolition?
Yeah, sorry, during the demolition, when the construction equipment was on site.
And we can also represent that we live next door, and when we came home, we had dust and plaster all over our floor, and it was, you know,
I have a question.
completely remodeled, so. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I didn't mean to interrupt. You said you've owned both these properties for how long now?
We bought 3249 in May of 16, and then we bought this in September.
And so what was your original intent when you purchased these properties for this particular building?
So it was going into foreclosure by the city for taxes, and we wanted to purchase the adjoining property. We weren't sure what we were going to do with the house. We for sure were going to carve the middle empty off onto our property for a bigger yard. And then, you know, this has kind of exacerbated or accelerated the process, and so now we're essentially trying to make it add another lot.
And last question, I mean, you were aware that you were purchasing property in a historic district. I'm assuming you knew that.
Yeah.
Okay. And the neighbors who signed the petition that they would support your demo, I mean, this is really binding, but is it fair to say they'd probably also support if you passed around a petition saying you wanted to rehab the building?
Well, there were 2 or 3 neighbors that said they would prefer it rehabbed, and they just simply didn't sign in support. And so we gave them that option.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there's not like a checkbox that says, hey, what do you want us to do with the property? But they were offered that, you know, and they just didn't sign if they were not in support of the demo and wanted us to rehab it.
Thank you.
One other question from me. The calculation you had for construction costs, I didn't see anything about historic tax credits in there.
No, there's not a line item.
Eligible for that?
From what I understand and what I've been told it would be, I don't know what that means. I don't know what the discount, you know, how to take.
25% of what you invest into the property
Okay.
would be eligible. So not purchase price, but what you invest in. At least, yeah, we've got an expert in the audience, it'd be at least $50,000. So that's a lot of the way these old timers make profits.
Well, we still have to come up with $200,000 to rehab it, so.
I think that 130 was high for comps. Like
The
you said, on
130
higher,
square
yeah,
foot?
it was high. I don't think you'd
Yeah.
get that.
We
I
don't
know
either.
that street very well.
Well,
I have a couple clients on it.
But that wipes out the $9,000.
109 is what we bought our house for.
Sorry. While we're speaking on that, two of your line items for sure were significantly high. Cost to build a garage and the cost of the kitchen, and then the cost of tuck pointing was moderately high.
Can we see that sheet again?
It was 40,000, 40,000,
It was
and
30 for
30,000.
tuck pointing, 40 for a kitchen, and I can't remember what I
And
paid
40 for the garage.
That was just a
I've
simple.
also known people renovate their kitchen in our neighborhood and it costs $70,000.
Yeah.
So we
Well,
tried to
There's
pick
currently no
middle
kitchen
ground.
at all.
No working
There's
kitchen.
not
Well,
a single
yeah,
working
I-
kitchen or appliance. And the plumbing was ripped out of the house, so we have to do all new plumbing. Somebody came in and helped
Yeah, we had a
themselves to the
burglary on the property.
copper.
Yeah, for sure. Garage could be cut by 15,000. I would say that was also the case with the kitchen. Again, if you're looking at this from a developer standpoint, which is different than if you are living in it and you are going all out. And probably about 5,000 on the tuck pointing. So I think when you run those numbers, no, when I say 5,000, I mean 5,000 less on the tuck pointing. So 15,
Yeah.
15, 15, 5, plus historic tax credits put you well on your way.
But again, the 130 square foot's also.
Well,
fairly
I
generous.
understand that, but 50, 15, 15, and 5 is 85. And so even if you were at 123 under contract, it's still a win.
Like I said, you live next door, and our house was 106 a square foot, and it's
109, actually.
109. Sorry.
But, yeah.
Well, I understand that, but I'm
We were generous with the numbers. Just
Yeah,
Sure.
I just
I'm-
ran hunts on that a few months ago. Not in this, on a different house on that same block, and that's high.
Again, I'm going with under contract at 123, pending at 122. So let's say that that's the number.
Sure.
Run those numbers again with that 85, and I still think that you come out in the black.
And we've got the economic hardship of, generating even $150,000 to rehab this property is going to be hard to come by.
I have a question.
And what the numbers that you submit are the numbers that you have submitted. We're just sort of poking at them
Right.
Yeah.
to try to understand them.
Yeah.
I have a question. Did someone say something about the building commissioner is gonna build the wall back up? Have you
Yeah,
spoken
we
to him
haven't heard
it?
about that until
First time
7
we've heard
minutes
that.
ago, so.
Oh, I was just wondering, what is he gonna charge you, or what is, huh?
What or is?
What in correlation to all these other prices going up there? I don't know.
I don't think we know very much about that offer, but
I just-
it was introduced as an interesting thing that if in fact we do not uphold this appeal,
Yeah,
they may be interested in, or not.
yeah, I was just wondering.
But again, this is a period of time to question them about the material that they have submitted, and if your record is complete.
I think so.
Okay.
Well, sorry, I didn't get to ask. So I have one question. So when was the house built that you want to tear down?
1905 is
So-
what the records say.
I guess I saw your PowerPoint, but the ordinance, the Benton Park Local Historic District Ordinance says that buildings which are considered contributing on the National Register of Historic Places, which I know you're taking issue with, and/or are 75 years old or older are considered historically significant. So, I mean, it meets the 75-year test, correct?
It does, but that ordinance is not going to age well.
What?
It's not going to age well. 75 years, if it was, 75 years today is the 40s. So, I mean, houses in the 40s aren't necessarily historic just because they were built in the 40s. They're just old. That's what we, essentially stand on this, on this
Actually,
house.
we're learning in other neighborhoods, we're protecting mid-century modern buildings
Yeah.
now, under that same definition. And some of the ordinances that have those definitions were created to prevent the construction of further buildings that look like what we now consider historic by that definition.
Well, I think this is a 1910 ordinance, or I'm sorry, 2010 ordinance. This is a brand-new ordinance, so I think they contemplated that a house, certainly a 1905 house, and one even from up to the 40s is historic.
Yeah.
Good point.
But, I mean, again, historic, it is, it's categorized as a craftsman home. We don't believe, it doesn't look to me, again, not an expert, that it fits that style. So it doesn't, as, Commissioner Vines so eloquently put, it's not built of a certain era to authentically represent a style. I think it may have been miscategorized or misclassified.
But the date of construction is correct.
Yeah. We don't dispute that.
Anything else you want to introduce?
No.
Thank you very much. Karen Bodie Baxter. Your name, please?
Karen Bodie Baxter, 5811 Dolores Street in the
Will you-
city of St. Louis.
Will your testimony be the truth?
My testimony will be the truth, as I
You
understand.
said something from the chair over there.
So I thought I better get up here and say it for
thought
the
so.
record. Historic tax credits would be available, state historic tax credits could be available on the renovation of a house of this size. They would not be subject to the cap that we see all about in the news, so there's none of the issues that we're facing with some large projects right now. So they could go in, turn in their application, their plans, their scope of work, and then they, when those were approved, they would get approval and a preliminary allocation of 25% of what would be their qualified costs, which, you know, estimating from what they have there would be over $200,000 worth of qualified expenses, so that would be $50,000 worth of state historic tax credits that could go towards a loan application when they apply, if they were to apply for a construction loan with a bank. The banks do recognize those as an asset for figuring out whether or not to give a loan to help do the rehab. So
And how do you come to know this?
because I have been working on historic tax credit applications here in St. Louis and in Missouri since 1998 when the tax credit law was passed, and I've done over, I gave up counting, but I will tell you that I know I have over 400 projects that have received their tax credits, finished their work on their buildings here in St. Louis.
Thank you. Questions for Karen? This
So you
side?
know Eric Friedman?
Side?
Oh, I definitely know Eric. I know Benton Park, I know everybody, so, yeah.
I can tell from the look on your face you do know Eric.
Yes, oh yeah, I know Eric, yes.
Okay. But any questions on this side for Karen? Questions on this side for Karen? David?
I just, that's a tool that you guys were mentioning, and I want to make sure that they
you.
realize
Tim
that that's
Mulligan?
possible.
I actually just have a question. Is she testifying as an individual or an expert? I want to make sure the record's clear. I don't know.
I think she qualified as an expert.
Well, we would like to object that she wasn't actually put forward as an expert and qualifications weren't hashed out. Just for the record. Okay.
Noted.
That's fine. No, that's okay.
Tim Mulligan?
Yes, Tim.
And attached it. No, I unattached it.
Yes.
So that it's not
Timothy Mulligan, 3117 Lemp Avenue, a longtime Benton Park resident and chair of the Building Review Committee for 20 years,
Have you served on this board?
and 7 years as a commissioner on the Preservation Board.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
And is your testimony going to be the truth?
Yes.
Proceed.
I received notification that a demolition to a structure had taken place on this property, and that Alderman Gunther, Commissioner Krasnoff were immediately involved and maneuvered just to suspend further damage to the structure. And this was being treated very carefully as the recent owners are active members of the Benton Park organization and involved. And so through that, I think we were respectful. We empathize with their plight. However, this is a historic district, and it actually was established in 2006. And much of it was to stem the development or redevelopment that really wasn't historically sympathetic or compatible. One of the other things was some of the inadvertent demolitions that have taken place have been done illegally, or the guise of an accidental collision with construction equipment to the building. So there have been a few buildings lost over the past 20 years in that vein. But we generally work very closely with the developers just to come up with a reasonable solution that works for the owner and likewise the neighborhood. So.
Questions on this side? Questions on this side? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Alderman Gunther?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Dan Gunther. I also live on Indiana, 3000 block of Indiana. Again, I am a member of the Neighborhood Association's Building Review Committee for 17 years, and then acting as the alderman over the last 2 years. And
Will your
I swear
testimony
to
be the
tell the truth.
Okay,
Yeah.
proceed.
So again, up here, just kind of reiterating a lot that has been said. When I moved to Benton Park 17 years ago, I moved there because of the architecture, because of the history, because of the buildings from that were built in the 1890s, or before, or these the ones such as this built in the 1900s. But we still feel that it is a part of the fabric of our neighborhood to have, and we're very fortunate to have so many buildings that have had walls collapse on them, have been falling in, and over the last 17 years, I've seen a whole lot of development in the neighborhood without, as far as I know, one demolition really being approved in the neighborhood. As Mr. Mulligan said, there have been a couple buildings that came down on weekends that we were upset about, but I don't really remember even prior to running for office, buildings that were approved for demolition. I also do remember coming to these hearings quite often, speaking against tearing down buildings in the neighborhood, and most of them have, all of them have been rehabbed to this point. So I guess I will say that I am no stranger to this board, coming up here opposing demolitions, and I think out of the last 3 that I may have been up here opposing, I will say, years ago, 3001 Missouri Avenue had an application. They were denied. That ended up being redeveloped, a little cottage house on the alley that we were able to separate another parcel of land next to it. So now I have 2 parcels of land there. The 3001 Missouri little cottage house is currently for sale for $390,000. And then the 3003 Missouri, which is the little cottage house that we fought to keep from being demolished, sold in May of 2019 for $330,000. So there's definitely a market there. Another one that the board may remember me coming up and opposing, 2913 Indiana Avenue. This was a one-room, just a wood frame little cottage house that had the entire back of it was a wreck. We now have a developer for that property. Transform STL is working with Cultural Resources and our neighborhood board to get the drawings approved for that, but it's another example of a property that was in quite disrepair, and I think during that time a handful of the board members really asked if we could save anything there, but that is proof that we have a developer and we're saving that building. We still do have one we're working on though. Everyone knows 2205 Lynch, the stone cottage building. We are still trying to get the owner of that building to meet with she's met with realtors and developers, but we're just trying to get her to agree that it would be worthwhile for her to sell that property and let someone else develop it. So we have had successes, but we're also still working on a handful of properties. Another one, 2322 Gravois. It is a 1900, right around 1900s building. We call it in the neighborhood the Pockles building, but this is at the intersection of Gravois, Jefferson, and Sydney Street, kind of the 6-way intersection down there. Deagle Property, or Deagle Trucks owns it, and they have been denied 2 demolition permits, I believe 2008, 2012. They were denied demolition permits. Now they have asked me again for another demolition permit, and I've said, no, I'm not going to support it, but they'll be coming up in front of this board, I'm sure, in the future, asking us to decide whether we'll let them tear that building down, which on a 6-way corner happens to be the only one of 2 things in this neighborhood. And I would like to continue this fight. So I put up here a picture just because we've been looking through different pictures, trying to get a good view of that side building. This is the property, the 3243 Indiana. the little gazebo that you could, I guess if you're looking at it on the left side, you can see part of that structure of the gazebo. Originally, they had, Z&L Construction had applied for a demolition permit for the garage and then a separate one for the building. They got approved the garage but for some reason decided to withdraw the demolition permit for the building. And then when they took the garage down, they decided to come up here and take part of that little gazebo down. And then somehow a giant hole fell in the wall. So, but we'll leave that as it is. I would just kind of like to say that, on this block, the house directly north of it, which is a townhome, connected to townhome, that one is actually sales pending on it right now at $237,500. So that is within the realms of the numbers that were put up there of what it would cost to rehab this building, as well as 3215 Indiana, which is just maybe 4 or 5 doors north of this building, which was on the market for $500,000. So I think if you look at the numbers and you look at what it would cost to rehab this, there is definitely a market for houses in the neighborhood. One of the other things that was brought up about having additional green space or side lots, as the applicants mentioned, they live directly south, but there is a full-size lot in the middle that they could carve out and then put this as a separate parcel of land and sell it off to someone that would want to develop it if they don't want to. I also find it interesting that you would be looking for a 50-foot side lot when we have 2 blocks of green space across the street from you, and 6 doors north of you, you have 14 acres of green space, which is Benton Park. So, I know obviously you don't have a fence around it, but they could potentially have an additional 25-foot lot on the side of their house and still keep this building. So, and I guess it was brought up about questioning the letter from Tim Mulligan, the neighborhood. So I would like to put on record that I also question this petition. I believe one of the names on there is Kevin Hampton, who lives at 3349 Indiana. I spoke with him today, and he said, I don't remember signing anything. I would never want a building torn down. So I think if you're going to look at that petition and say, oh, well, 9 people that live next to it say fine, speaking to Kevin Hampton, who was on the block, or on the 3300 block of Indiana today, he did not recall supporting tearing down a building. So maybe he signed for something else, but he said, I would never support tearing down a building. It's the fabric of our neighborhood. So yeah, I will kind of leave it at there. I would just ask that the board, not let them tear down a building, which in this picture from, I believe, September 25th of 2018, looks like it's a perfectly fine building to me. And then all of a sudden a gazebo gets torn down and there's a hole in it. So we'll leave that as it is and let Frank Oswald and Rich Sikora work out the rest of it. So, any questions for me?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else for the record? And
Daniel Krasnoff, I still swear to tell the truth. Couple points I want to make. One of the hallmarks of historic preservation and the designation of historic districts is that buildings are a record of their time. Some historic buildings, some old buildings are highly ornate and have lots of dramatic detail, and some of them are more plain. But the building you see in this slide and in the other slides I showed is a record of its time in the Benton Park National Register Historic District. And this is one kind of building that was built by the people who built that neighborhood at the height of its development as a community in the late 19th and early 20th century. So I do not believe that the fact that the building is somewhat plain in its design diminishes its contribution to the historic districts. It is a record of the history of the neighborhood, and as such has value as a contributing building to the district. I wanted to also clarify something that the alderman made reference to, and that is that there was one other permit on this site recently, and that is within the last 12 months there was a permit that applied for the demolition of this building. I didn't make that clear. That was canceled or withdrawn, however you want to say it. So there was a demolition permit that was approved for the garage, a demolition permit that was canceled for this building within the last 12 months, and a demolition of the gazebo without a permit, just to clarify that. And I would also state there was a reference to some buildings in the neighborhood having many empty lots in their adjacency. Well, there were probably historic buildings there at one time that got torn down, and that's a loss for the neighborhood and a small loss for the integrity of the district. Every time a contributing building is demolished in a historic district, it loses, assuming it's not a giant building, it loses some percentage or some part of its integrity. And the loss of this building would mean the loss of that integrity, and that's why it's considered a merit building, and that's why that's important. Finally, I'd just like to reiterate there's a hierarchy in the criteria in the ordinance, that they're in order of importance. The commonly controlled property criteria, which is the criteria that they've mentioned that I think, I could see the board thinking that is an important criteria, is criteria G. It's the second lowest criteria. Criteria B, which is the second highest, is the merit of the building or the quality of the building, and this is a merit building. So by that, a B criteria should trump a G criteria. There aren't unusual circumstances that have been documented in this case, and I think the discussion has shown that the numbers presented are not done in an expert fashion, and even if they were, there is still with the consideration of historic tax credits and folks on the board who are expert in the field of neighborhood or building revitalization, those numbers are quite suspect, and it looks like the building probably could pencil out as a potential economic rehab and does therefore have reuse potential under the ordinance.
Thank you. James or Holly, do you want to add anything? You're still under oath, or affirmation, or promise, or whatever it is you said.
So there have been 24 demolition residential permits granted since 2006 in the Benton Park Historic District, according to the City of St. Louis data. Grab one of those pictures. That's pretty much it. Anything else? Oh, and the ordinance, it doesn't specifically state the level, A, B, C, D doesn't mean A is most important. It's just subsections. I didn't see any reference to a hierarchy of importance. If I'm wrong, correct me. That's absolutely fine.
Sure, as long as we're not going to spend more than an hour doing it.
Yeah.
It'll only take 45 minutes.
Shoot me.
In ordinance 64832, let's find my place here.
Commissioner Richardson, can you find it faster?
I'm looking.
Under section 5, it says, all demolition permit application reviews pursuant to this chapter shall be made by the director of the office, who shall either approve or disapprove of all applications based upon the criteria of this ordinance. All appeals of the decision of the director shall be made to the preservation board. Decisions of the office or board shall be in writing, shall be mailed to the applicant immediately upon completion, and shall indicate the application by the office or board of the following criteria, which are listed in order of importance on the basis as the basis for the decision.
Oh,
I'm wrong. That's fine.
Okay.
oh gosh.
Anything
Okay,
else?
That's it.
Okay. Commissioners, that concludes the testimony in this appeal. Commissioner Richardson, have you got a motion?
Yes, I move that the Preservation Board uphold the director's denial of the demolition because the building does not satisfy the criteria of the ordinances that were introduced into record and is a merit building and contributing resource to the Benton Park Historic District.
Second.
A motion has been made and twice seconded. Who were the seconds?
Melanie.
Okay.
I might have been third.
Adana, get that? Okay, thank you. Discussion?
I'll say one thing, just really fast. I know everyone wants to get out. I just think that when you purchase a property in a historic district, then you know it's a historic district, that you have a level of responsibility to be stewards of that property that preceded you and that hopefully will succeed you after we're all gone. And I think that's very, very sacred.
No harm in asking, though, right?
Correct.
Okay.
I have something to say, Don. Yes, sir. If you want to go first, though.
Well.
You go first, I'll let you go.
Okay. I am concerned that it would take heavy equipment to take down a wooden gazebo.
Well, if you were taking down the garage and then the equipment was already there and rented, and you thought, you know what, I'll just take down that gazebo and possibly the back wall.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
The equipment was there for the garage, and there was actually a concrete pad that they took out too.
Hmm.
And we, like I said, we told them we wanted the gazebo and the lot cleared as much as they could. That's why that vehicle was there.
There was a bunch of other debris there. There was like a bunch of old trash from the previous owner and a giant pile of wood and just stuff that we couldn't physically.
We're not adding this to the record.
No, I know, I'm
Okay.
just chatting, I guess.
Yeah, we didn't request, you know.
You sat through an entire meeting, so I'm allowing some latitude to have this discussion.
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Killeen?
Well, I guess I just wanted to state that a lot of work went into the designation for this district to preserve what's there. I know that because I was part of the group that did that. And I understand, I live in this neighborhood too, and I understand wanting to have a side yard. We live on a lot on Sydney Street where our neighbors are 30 inches away. And we've always thought, wouldn't it be great to have, you could have a pool or, do whatever. But I guess in the end, we've come to terms with where we live. It's a neighborhood of old homes, and it's got a style to it. And as Commissioner Vine said, we also realize that we're stewards of this neighborhood. We're just passing through. And if we needed more land, we could move out to Chesterfield or wherever. And so I think it's important to remember that. But I do respect, you guys are homeowners, you own this building, you should be able to do what you want with it. This is America, right? However, you bought it in a historic district where it's filled with building huggers, like, who would tie themselves to this building before they'd let you tear it down illegally. I'm serious, they will. So I respect your desire, but I just wanted to explain the history of where we are.
I would like to just add to that nobody wants Tim Mulligan tied to their building. That would be awful. Further discussion, commissioners? Okay, hearing none. There is a motion on the floor. It's been made and seconded. I'm going to do this by roll. Commissioner Vaccaro, do you vote yes or no?
I'll pass.
Commissioner Vines, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Killeen, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Fathman, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Vaccaro?
Yes.
Commissioner Vaccaro votes yes. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 yeses. Commissioners, you have upheld the director's denial, and we now move to agenda item I. Commissioner Richardson, do I hear a motion on agenda item I?
Yes, I move that, because we're skipping H, I guess?
Did we skip H?
Yeah, we're on H.
Okay, let's do it.
Combine those two.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion on agenda items H and I?
Yes.
Yeah.
Karen?
I move that the Preservation Board direct the staff to prepare a report for the State Historic Preservation Office that the property meets requirements of National Register Criteria A and C with respect to item H, and National Register Criteria A with respect to item I.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Ayes have it.
I'd like to add for the record that I want to personally thank the extra work that the Cultural Resources Office did. We were having, I finally had it up to here and began to question my expertise in preparing National Register nominations because the SHPO staff had questioned whether it had significance as a commercial historic district for commerce or for architecture. And I thought, well, maybe I'm not writing it correctly. And two of the cultural resource staff actually read it, the draft, came out and spent 2 hours with me driving around Maplewood as well as this portion in the city of St. Louis to help me better understand that I wasn't crazy. And then also, Dan made it a point to attend a meeting that I called of all the property owners to let them know that this nomination was going forward finally. And I really appreciate all the work that they did and went above and beyond. And I'd also really would request that I get an actual letter to the SHPO for them to put into the file with the nomination, just because of the way the staff there has been acting about this nomination.
Commissioners, do we agree?
Yes.
What do we charge
Yes.
for those?
Okay.
Charge extra for that.
We charge extra for that, I'm sure. Postage stamp, yeah.
Now, were you speaking as an individual or as an expert?
We think you're an expert.
I object.
Okay, Commissioners, transmitting landmark designations to Planning Commission and Board of Public Service. Commissioner Richardson?
I move that we transmit the two nominations, Oscar Waring Home and Galilee Missionary Baptist Church, to the Planning Commission and the Board of Public Service.
Is there a second? Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Director's report?
I don't got one.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn? You got it. We stand adjourned.